Good evening. Welcome to the August 1st edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We're glad you're with us tonight, whether here in chambers or at home on TV or watching at some future time. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Good to see everybody again tonight. Just as a reminder, there are copies of tonight's agenda on the shelves on either side of the room and also available on our website. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the July 18th, 2023 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments from the council or questions about those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Item 4 on our agenda is the public comments portion of the meeting. This portion of the meeting is where we take comment on items typically not on tonight's agenda. If you've got something you'd like to share, please come on down to the podium. Tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, my name is John Cooper. I'm a long-time resident of Downers Grove. I'd like to thank you all for serving on the council. I know it's a big time commitment. So, I wanted to comment about the removal of permit parking from the Belmont lot. I've been a resident of Downers Grove for about 20 years. I've been parking there for approximately 20 years. I'm just trying to understand the driver of the decision. I believe the original idea was to provide a benefit to the residents and taxpayers of the town. I know it was part of the reason I moved to Downers Grove, that and the schools. I know that the lots appear empty at the moment, but you know, those are spaces that are actually paid for by the permits. It's not a revenue loss. It's just people who are, at least I believe so. You could switch to daily parking and end up with a lot of empty spaces that are not paid for. So I just hope you guys are considering all the factors. I know that people still own and pay for the passes. I don't know what the demand is for the passes. I believe there's still a waiting list. So I don't understand if people were not if we're not desiring the passes anymore, they would be returning them. They would be turning over. The waiting list would be going down. Many firms are requiring workers to return to premises. I know my firm is. I would suggest, suggest that maybe a phased approach might be more appropriate rather than eliminating all the parking passes. Just eliminate some of them. I'm afraid that when you return your pass, you can request movement to another lot. I think if word gets out or word gets around, you'll see a rush to move to the lots that still remain with passes. And those who can no longer retain their passes will probably end up fairly upset or angry. So I'm afraid you might have a lot of angry taxpayers on your hands. The other thing is you said that you expect a drop in revenue versus reduced costs. Have you put any data behind that, or can you try and make that public as to what sort of projections you're looking at or what you're making? And that's it. That's all I have. I just, I would be very disappointed. I just hope it's a thoughtful and measured decision. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We appreciate those comments. That is a potential subject that we may or may not take up in much more detail. So keep your eyes on the agendas. Please.
Good evening. My name is Warner Kienke, and I'm a recent resident of Downers Grove. We've been living here for approximately 5 years, and I came from Cook County prior to living here. So far, we love Downers Grove. When you go to the health club, there's a sign right on the window as you come in that we've been voted one of the most welcoming towns in who knows, the United States or the world or whatever. But also, we spent the past month celebrating the LGBT community. And we had all the signs and everything else on the windows, and we really welcomed the LGBT community. However, I've been involved with the library board meetings for about the past 8 or 9 months. And when we talk about people who are welcomed into this community, those people tend to look like me. And I don't know if any of you want to really look like me. I don't know. I want to look like me. But anyhow, what we have stated in public meetings in the library board is that if we have people who are non-white coming into Downers Grove, it will dumb down the programs in our schools, in the programs that we have in the community. The Downers Grove Library Board also starts off with recognizing that a lot of these buildings are built on lands of indigenous people. In the last meeting that I attended, there was an uproar by a certain group saying that we should not really recognize the indigenous people. We're white. And even persons of color, they regard as being racist. When an individual who does not look like me hears those kinds of comments, what do they think? And that is the question that I'd like to talk about. According to the 2020 census, 13.7% of the population of Downers Grove is classified as being non-white. This means that 6,880 people in Downers Grove are classified as non-white. I do not see the people downtown in Downers Grove. I do not see the people around in the communities. However, when I go to a store about a mile south of here, I see those people. There is also a Hispanic shop not too far away from here. I see people of Hispanic origin, and they speak Spanish in there. Why don't I see them here? In addition, we have a Hindu temple not too far away from here, Muslim mosques, a synagogue, and a Buddhist temple, all within proximity of this area right here. And therefore, in terms of being a welcoming community, yesterday there was on the news where somebody in another state tried attacking children in a Hebrew school. And also, the synagogue that is in proximity to this council meeting also needs to have an armed guard in order for them to have services. If we use a comparison of a neighboring village, Naperville has a non-white population of 31.2%. And they've attempted to address some of the minority issues. Naperville in its history was a sundowner community. I don't know what the history is of Downers Grove when you take a look at it, but many of the communities in DuPage County were sundowner towns. Recent attempts to diversify and include are celebrations in a major park in Naperville on Juneteenth. I don't know of anything that we did with Juneteenth here in Downers Grove. Furthermore, they're having a Halal festival, which is a Muslim celebration in one of the major parks in Naperville. The village has also made a conscientious effort to address its past through a program called Unvarnished. And I attended a presentation on Unvarnished in Naperville that is based on a federal grant to take a look at the deeds to various lands. And what Naperville is trying to do is change the deeds to the lands to include that the lands will not be sold to black people. That is in many of the deeds that were established in Naperville when it was a Sundowner community. With the unvarnished grant, homeowners can change that deed to remove that for approximately $50. Otherwise, if we did it on our own, it would cost approximately $500 to $1,000 to do that. Therefore, in terms of the population, if we compare 13.7% to 31.7%, my question is, how welcoming are we as a community, and what can we do about that? For myself, my background is that I was born in Germany after World War II. That's why I've got the funky name. But also, I remember the anti-Semitism in the concentration camps. When we came to this country, I remember Jim Crow, which was a part of this heritage, which we don't necessarily even talk about. That's a part of our country. As a result, I've been involved with civil rights for approximately 60 years. If there's an interest to address these issues, I would be more than willing to participate in any discussion on that behalf. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Others? Okay, we will continue on. We have some presentations this evening. Item 5 on our agenda tonight. We have a couple partner organizations that we work hand in hand with to try and do good things for the village. The first up is our Economic Development Corporation. Welcome, Brian. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you again. Before I get started this evening, I have another world premiere of our first ever quarterly economic development video. But before we get to that, just like to share some updates here. So before the next time we meet later on this fall, we have some events coming up. The Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation will be participating. Once again in the ICSC. This is the International Shopping Centers Convention here in the city of Chicago, October 10th. We're also going for the first time ever to the Site Selectors Guild. This is a collection of site selection professionals. These are the individuals working with lawyers, accountants, economic development professionals to help larger corporations find new locations throughout the United States and overseas as well. So we'll be attending that October 14th through the 16th. Also, we were just asked for the first time to be an instructor for the Illinois Basic Economic Development course. So we'll be teaching a couple of courses on that, on marketing for economic development as well as site selection. We'll also be going to, for the first time, partnering hopefully with the DuPage County Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as the Park District at the IAAPI. Please don't ask me what the initials stand for, but it's basically entertainment venues, different types of events, and everybody's big favorite thing now, pickleball. So we'll be going out to that one. And then starting up again in September, we'll be having the first of 4 events through our Community Navigator program. This time around, we'll be focusing on new businesses since the start of the pandemic. We are scheduled tentatively right now for our first event to be held the week of September 11th. Details to still come out. October, we'll have another one for Manufacturing Month. November, I believe, is going to be marketing and or something regarding accounting, so on and so forth. So we're still working with the state. We're still working with some of our local partners to kind of coordinate those things, and we'll be sure to share that information with the village. So without further ado, I present to you our Q1 economic development, Q2 key performance indicator report. So starting tomorrow, that video will be available on our dgedc.com website, as well as all of our social media. A couple things to just point out there. A lot of it is good news. Again, we're seeing consistent growth throughout the community in terms of economic development, the types of projects coming in, job creation, investment, all great things that we want to see. So to date, we've seen 5 projects come into the village here. If you recall, last year we had 11, so right where we should be halfway through the year. We're just about halfway to where we were at last year. Of those 5 projects, we expect 190 jobs to be created. We have 126,000 square feet of retail, industrial, or commercial space that'll be filled up, and it creates about $9.2 million of private investment within the community. As you saw there, we also reported out on Q1 sales tax, hotel tax, and food and beverage tax. Again, this is just due to the timing and the reporting throughout the village and the Department of Revenues. So again, really good first quarter for combined sales tax. We had $6.09 million received. It's a year-over-year increase, Q1 over for 5.44%. Food and beverage tax did really well, $847,000 for the first quarter. It's a 1.68 year-over-year increase. And then our hotel sales tax, we did $168,000. So, and that was a 2.2% increase year-over-year. And then the last thing, something again, I want to give some praise to Aaron and the downtown staff here. You saw there we attracted from April 1st to the end of June, which included such events as the Wine Walk, Grove Fest, and a number of the other different things, the Moose Lodge car shows. Between April 1st and the end of June, we attracted over 1.1 million visitors to the downtown area. So that is a 4.3% increase year over year. And of that 1.1 million visits, that is 368,000 unique visitors. So again, we saw folks come back not just once, twice, 3 times, and they spent over 2 hours here in the downtown. So again, going to the different events, going into our shops, eating in our restaurants. So all really good positive views there. And again, kudos to Erin and her staff for creating great events, for having folks stay here in the downtown and spend some money. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. A lot of good news there. Any questions for Brian? Additional comments? Don't stop now.
All right, great. Thank you, guys.
Next up is our Downtown Management Corporation partner, Aaron. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time and interest tonight. My name is Erin Venezia, and I'm the Executive Director for Downtown Downers Grove Management Corporation. Downtown Downers Grove, Special Service Area Number 11, is supported by the owners of the 165 commercial properties within the SSA and is home to approximately 280 businesses. We continue to maintain a first floor occupancy rate of approximately 98%. We have welcomed 2 new businesses since May: Bonita Bowls at 4956 Main Street and Solana Aesthetics at 5143 Mokel Drive. This is Bonita Bowls' 3rd location and Solana Aesthetics' 2nd location. 2 businesses have recently changed ownership in the downtown: Barchito at 1012 Curtis and Kuman at 5100 Main Street, Suite 3. We will soon welcome Costello Jewelry at 5117 Main Street, a family-owned jewelry store opening its 3rd location. A dining establishment by the name of 1126 at 5126 Main Street. This will offer tapas style and live music, and Luku Madness at 5129 Main Street, offering mini Greek donuts with lots of different fun toppings. Dash Downers Grove is located at 926 Maple Avenue. They've started to welcome their residents, and we will continue to work with them to encourage their residents to shop and dine in the downtown. We have sold $25,000 in Downtown Downers Grove gift cards to date this year, which is an increase of 34% from 2022 year to date. Our office has reimbursed downtown businesses more than $19,000 so far this year, which is an increase of 13% from 2022 year to date. The downtown had 368,000 unique visitors May 1st through July 23rd, 2023. That is a 28% increase in visitors from 2019, and a 7% increase in visitors from 2022 for that time period. These visitors equal more than 1.1 million visits to the downtown from May 1st through July 23rd, 2023. This number is up 22% from 2019 and 1.3% since 2022. Friday Night Live started May 26th and will continue to run every Friday night, 5:30 to 8 p.m. through September 1st. That live entertainment changes weekly, and so far all have been well received, and the bands are looking forward to coming back again next year. We also have a waiting list of bands that would like to come join the fun next year. This runs in conjunction with the Downers Grove Moose Cruise Nights. The Moose Cruise Nights are held 4 to 8 p.m. on Warren Avenue between Forest and Main and in Parking Lot A. The Moose Lodge has partnered with a different nonprofit each week, and this week the live entertainment at Friday Night Live will be Vinyl Destination, and the not-for-profit at the Moose Cruise Night will be the West Suburban Humane Society. Another community favorite returned in June. We kicked off our Loyal to Local program. Customers have the chance to be rewarded for supporting local this summer. Weekly, we draw 2 winners for 2 $50 downtown gift cards, and in September, we do the grand prize drawing. The grand prize is made up of gift cards and items from all participating businesses. To celebrate the Warhol exhibit at the MAC at COD, Downers Grove Downtown Management Corp. hosted a Warhol-inspired poster contest for children and adults this spring. We worked with Maximum Printing in the downtown to print all of the entries into posters so we could display them. The first, second, and third place winners were displayed throughout the downtown in business windows. All entries, including those that received honorable mention, have been on display in the window of our office. The winners received a gift card to Downtown Downers Grove. There are many talented young and adult artists. We also had pole banners made in Warhol-inspired design that are on the 8 nonprofit poles within the downtown. We were happy to work with EQDG to once again help them connect with the businesses to showcase the amazing talent of local artists on the 31 of the businesses' windows in the downtown for the month of June. In July, the downtown hosted their annual sidewalk sale with more than 20 retailers participating to start to make room for their, dare I say, holiday inventory. The 46th Annual Fine Arts Festival will be September 9th through the 10th. This event will run 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day and is held in the middle of Main Street from Curtis to Maple. This year, we will have more than 50 artist booths lining the street. We're happy to also be bringing back the live entertainment in Pocket Park during the festival hours. This will hopefully showcase a mix of professional and student musicians. Besides the crosswalk improvement work, which will look beautiful when completed, there is a lot going on in the downtown and within the downtown businesses during these summer months. To help spread the word of all that the downtown has to offer, we have transitioned from a monthly Downtown Downers Grove Happenings newsletter to a weekly newsletter. This newsletter now has an average open rate of 58%, approximately 18% higher than the industry average. I look forward to seeing you all shopping, dining, and enjoying the downtown. Thanks for letting me give you a glimpse into the past few months. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Erin. Any questions for Erin, downtown management? Thanks for being here. Item C under the presentations is a financial update. Dave, is that you tonight?
That is me, Mayor. Thank you so much. Tonight I'll be providing just a brief update on our general fund. The general fund is our primary operating fund. Most of the services provided by the village are accounted for in this general fund. That fund is budgeted to be sustainable with revenues of $58.4 million and expenses of just under $58 million. And the ending fund balance is budgeted to increase by just over $415,000 this year to $22.6 million, approximately 39% of our annual expenses, and that's the targeted amount consistent with our policy and consistent with rating agency recommendations. So here's an update on the general fund revenue performance through the first half of this year. So through June, the general fund revenues were just over $32 million, tracking favorable to the budget. Given this performance, staff estimates that the year-end revenue will be about $62.6 million. That's about $4.2 million better than the budget and about the same as FY22 revenue. So tracking about the same as last year. Revenue has been bolstered by strong performance, just as Brian told us, in sales tax, home rule sales tax, food and beverage tax. So that's a brief overview of the revenues and our estimate for the year-end revenues at this point. And then on the expense side, more good news. Through June, general fund expenses were just over 27 million, tracking right on budget. Given this performance, staff estimates that year-end expenses will also be right about on budget, just under $58 million. So this is a slide that shows those two pieces of information together, as well as our staff year-end estimate. So if the current budget performance continues for the rest of the year, the change in the fund balance is expected to be a positive $4.6 million. And this would allow us to pursue many of the financial management strategies that this council has been talking about in the long-range planning sessions just a couple of weeks ago. So to quote my good friend Brian from the EDC, we're right where we should be, right where we need to be. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Dave. Comments or questions from the council? No? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man.
Moving on, we're on item 6 on our agenda tonight. That's a consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Items 7 and 8 listed on our agenda are active agenda and first reading. These are normally the portions of the meeting where we will either take up new items under our first reading or act on items we've discussed previously under active agenda. We do not have anything on that tonight. So we'll move on to the mayor's report. I have a very brief report. This is a new business item related to liquor commissioner work. Village has received an application for a Class O outdoor liquor license from Honey Jam Cafe, LLC, doing business as Honey Jam Cafe, located at 3000 Oak Grove Road. Pursuant to Section 3-12D of the Liquor Control Ordinance, a public hearing for a liquor license application may be waived. The application must be placed on file for a minimum of 2 weeks, subject to public comment prior to the issuance of a license. At this time, I am placing this application on file in the village clerk's office, barring any objection once the 2-week waiting period has passed. A Class O outdoor license shall be issued to Honey Jam Cafe, LLC, doing business as Honey Jam Cafe, located at 3000 Oak Grove Road. This is placed on file Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. In layman's terms, Honey Jam Cafe is an existing liquor license holder who is asked to add an outdoor license to their license package. We are waiving the public hearing requirement for that request. And that takes us to council member reports. This is an opportunity for council members to report out on goings-on in the community, other groups that they're working with, or events that they would like to tell the public about. We'll start with Commissioner Davenport.
No report, Mayor.
Danny.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick things. First of all, on a sad note, I just want to note a longtime member and hearty contributor to our community, Kathy Nybo, recently passed away after a long illness. As many will know and remember, Kathy served for many years on our former Community Events Commission and was very active in planning the former Heritage Festival before it later became the Groves Festival that we celebrate every day. She was also very active in the Friends of the Edwards House organization, which was dedicated to advocating, educating, and celebrating both historical preservation and voluntary historic landmarking in Downers Grove. So she has left a long and very positive mark on our community. She will be greatly missed, and on behalf of the village, we extend our thoughts and prayers to her and her family. And on a related and happier note, there are approximately 323 days left until Rotary Grove Fest. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Martin. Chris?
Yeah, just one thing. The local organization 100 Women Who Care is having their relaunch event at NEAT in Westmont tomorrow, August 2nd. This is a group that supports 4 local charities a year by pooling donations from their members and then selecting a charity each quarter to support. So tomorrow's event is purely informational, and there will be appetizers and a cash bar. Again, this is tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at Neat Restaurant in Westmont. And you can find more information at 100, the number, womenwhocaredownersgrove.com. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Greg?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, we are continuing our long-range planning, high-priority action item development process tonight. So we'll take a brief recess. We will reconvene over in the committee room as we've been doing. Y'all are welcome to join us over there in a few minutes. with it? No
we go.
no confirmation? All right. All right, welcome, everybody that's come to join us here in the committee room. Welcome, colleagues. We're going to continue our high-priority action item, long-range planning process. Tonight's goal, if you were able to access the board packet from last Friday, one of the things that should have jumped out is that today's intention is to establish a level of clarity on these high-priority action items. Tonight is not intended to be a selection process or an elimination process or an endorsement process. It's to make sure that we are all dealing with the same understanding of what the subject is. We don't succeed all the time in that, but we do work pretty hard at trying to make sure that the 7 council members are dealing with the same basic set of information. And so tonight's, what we've done is, there was a process by which we submitted information to the village manager, and so we are going to go through in some level of detail about half of the items that are on the list. Certainly it doesn't exclude anything else, but we're going to start by going through that process. And the idea would be that anybody that's got questions or needs clarity, we would try and get that on the table and get it clarified. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave now. He's going to kind of MC this process.
So I'll build on what Mayor Barnett is saying there and just give a quick overview and reminder for most of us of the importance of the priority action items and the council's work plan that accompanies it. So this is obviously a key component of long-range plan because it's the part of the plan that establishes the council's priorities and sets our work plan for the village starting in September of this year through about May of 2025. And the annual budgets that staff prepares in 2024 and 25 are intended to support the priorities that are identified through this process. So one of the most important things that the council can do in their roles is to establish the list of priority action items in the work plan that serves as the schedule for the next 18 months to 2 years. So we've been on a multi-step, very deliberative process in creating the list of priority action items and developing that work plan. At our last meeting, the council identified all the potential priority action items that will be up for consideration during this process. Pleased to say that we now have 30 on the list, which is the most we've had in the time that I've been here in the village of Downers Grove. So clearly a lot of items that the council is interested in sorting through and potentially putting on the list on our work plan. The next step is where we are tonight, which is establishing a shared understanding of those descriptions. We've been using this process for several years now, and one of the things we've learned is we're better when all council members have a shared understanding of the descriptions. We have experienced a couple times in the years past where we've gotten pretty far down the process into the work plan being developed, and we've had council members say, oh, that's not exactly what I thought that project was, or I thought it was something different, and that can be challenging. So we're being very deliberative here in this process to make sure that when we get to the end result of this priority action item list and the work plan truly does reflect the council's priorities, and it starts with a shared understanding of the project descriptions. So that's what we're doing here tonight. The next step is we will get together a few staff members with each council member individually in that couple-week period between August 2nd and about August 18th, just to have a better understanding of individual level priorities. And we will use that into the next step, where staff will produce a draft work plan and list of priority action items. That will be really taken by this council and produced in a way that reflects the council's work plan and the council's list. And that could take place on August 22nd and into Tuesday, September 5th if necessary. So if you're a follower of village council meetings, we are not meeting on August 15th. Instead, we're having a special meeting on August 22nd so that all 7 council members can be here for the consideration and establishment of the list and work plan. So again, tonight, just a recap of what I said a minute ago, we have we recently had the discussion on identifying potential items. That was done last time. There are 30 items. And tonight, we are here to establish a shared understanding of those on the list. And based on individual comments we received informally, we've identified 14 of those to be presented here tonight. So it's really going point by point here, making sure that we have a shared understanding of each of these. And I'll start with Fairview Focus Area Implementation Plan. This project consists of implementing the recommendations of the Fairview Area Focus Plan that is in the comprehensive plan currently. Preparing and pursuing the implementation plan would include, and this is the change we've made, this is the only one that's changed since previous discussions. First, defining the area in the project, right? Relooking at that before we go any further. Amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map. Developing financial policies and incentives to facilitate redevelopment of private properties. Financing policies and mechanisms to pay for public improvements. Business attraction and retention efforts. Streetscape and landscape improvements. And redevelopment of commuter parking lots. So that is the description of this project, as a potential project as it stands now. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Dave. Just a further clarification for anybody watching or here tonight, this 14, how do we get the 14 from the 30? In those, council members had questions about these generally. So council members were asked to send some notes to staff about where they had questions in that list of 30, and some of them, like for instance, continue to finish the facilities project, there weren't any questions. So that's how we got to this list of 14. This will, I expect, will be a little bit of a mix of last week or 2 weeks ago, plus a normal first reading kind of an environment. So we'll just go around and see if there's any questions. I suspect some of that will spark back and forth and clarification needs. Martin, you want to start? Work our way around the table on this one?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And I'm not concerned about the area because I understand that sometimes you have to draw a circle somewhere or a dodecahedron or whatever it is that you end up working with. So we kind of have a aspirational identification of the properties that would be involved in the Fairview Focus area, but as we know from past experience, opportunities arise once things get started, so there may be opportunities to change or modify that, and I think we have to approach those as they make sense. So I'm not so concerned about the definition. You got to start somewhere, and you make adjustments as you go along. I think every development we've done has not ended up exactly the way it was started because you have to take in information and opportunities in the field as they present themselves. So I don't have any issues with it.
Mike?
I think that the description pretty well captures what we're looking to do here. If I were to add anything to it, I'd highlight that in our current comp plan, there's a statement that says, quote, Warren Avenue right-of-way provides an excellent opportunity for a safe off-street pedestrian connection between Fairview and downtown. So adding that as a component of this, the idea that this is a focus area, but there's a connection to the downtown. And I'll leave it at that. I think the rest of my comments are contained in the description. I'm good.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I have nothing new to add to this one. I think it's well covered with the addition of Commissioner Davenport's connection comments, so I'm good with it.
Craig?
Nothing additional for me.
Leslie?
Nothing additional from me either.
Annie?
No additional.
Well, let's see if I can screw it up then.
I've been waiting to say that all day.
Do we, in development of this plan, it says implementing recommendations of Fairview area, do we anticipate the involvement of either a consultant or an ad hoc in this process? That's one of the questions I had.
Mm-hmm.
That would affect certainly prioritization because of timing and burden. So if we do intend those things, we should know it on the front end. And then what is there a target timeline? This is our work plan, which is 2.5 years-ish, 2 to 2.5 years. Some of these things are probably not, right? And so would part of the intended result of this be a target timeline?
Yeah, this is one of the only ones on the list of potential projects that will definitely go longer than this council's term, because this is a multi-decade project, much like we did the downtown plan implementation between the mid to late 1990s and just finished up. Well, it's always ongoing, but we finished up with that TIF district just a couple of years ago. So yeah, this one will definitely stretch beyond this council.
So we should probably I think we should have in our heads that we're going to engage at least a consultant and likely an ad hoc committee for such a thing. When you think about the sort of duplication or replication of the downtown process, it's a huge thing with decades of impact.
Yeah, I agree. There have been many downtown plans that, at least, if nothing else, sparked thought and creativity about what it could be, but nothing was carved in stone, because even I don't know how many different versions of the downtown plan we've seen, and it doesn't look like any of them.
Mm-hmm.
There were different ideas that came up, there were different thoughts, there were different opportunities, things present themselves, things changed, sound changed, priorities changed, but you gotta start somewhere.
So with that, Mayor and Council, what we're hearing is consensus to add the concept that Commissioner Davenport talked about, while pulling up that language that's already in there in the description. And yes, over the life of this project, there will be consultants, so staff will add that into the description that it will likely include use of consultants through this multi-year process.
What about thoughts on ad hoc? That's a different thing, but it does set expectations for the community about how we go forward in this process.
You gotta have some storyboarding first for people to react to, but yes.
Yeah.
And you know, the residents of this area and businesses in that area
Right.
are obviously going to have some concern and maybe some excitement, right, over the ideas
Hopefully.
to be considered, right? So, yeah, so I think this is a necessary way to involve the community as well.
Right, the flip side is people may have ideas that, for one reason or another, are already not feasible or practical, and just having that layout is always a good thing, so the expectations are managed.
Yep.
Yeah, for that reason, I was thinking more neighborhood meeting type, information flow as opposed to an ad hoc committee. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea, but I don't know that we necessarily need to go to a full-blown ad hoc committee.
So part of this would be a development of a process to facilitate public input beyond just showing up at a meeting on an
Right.
agenda.
Well, I think about what we did with the schools with our master facility planning and how we had a consultant and then we engaged the public at several meetings to present ideas, get feedback on those ideas, and then synthesize that and see how it affects the overall plan, build some consensus that way. So that sounds like a good approach to me.
Okay.
So what we're hearing then is we'll add the comprehensive plan connections concept in the description. We'll add that the description includes use of consultants over time, and that there will be a public input process as part of this potential project.
Sure.
Does that work for everybody?
Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Excellent. That's a great start. That's exactly the kind of input we're looking for in descriptions.
Just point out that the mayor did not screw that up.
Depends on how you define success.
Give him time.
Managing expectations.
The next one we're highlighting to make sure we have a shared understanding of the description of the project is the Community Grants Program. This project includes exploring the creation of a Community Grants Program. Under this program, the village would provide grant funding to qualifying not-for-profit organizations using an application-based competitive process. Mayor?
Thank you. Mike, you want to start?
All right, anything more to add? I think it captures it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I think not necessarily add, but maybe remove. I think we'd likely have an application process for this, although I'm not sure we should be that specific about it now being an application-based competitive process. I really want to look at this with fresh eyes to understand the best way to execute on this. I could see a needs-based factor be in this, and that would not be so much selection based on a bunch of apply and then we pick and choose, but more based on certain criteria as an example of a way that we could select. The wording in this of it being an application-based competitive process feels like it's 20 in, 3 are selected, and we give, and then I just don't want to limit us. So my thought was, without that, we're looking to put together a new program to grant funding to qualifying not-for-profit organizations. Period. And then we can, should this move forward, we can flush out what that process, the how.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the idea on the table is it would stop at not-for-profit orgs and then delete.
Yeah.
terms of the description of this project at this point.
Correct.
Anybody got any strong feelings about that? Kind of
I support
nodding
that,
around the table?
that
Okay.
change, yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. It just goes back to the issue of, are we creating a community grants program from whole cloth, which is what I understand Commissioner Gilmartin would be mostly interested in, or are we reestablishing the one that previously existed, or something else? That's where I think there's a little bit of uncertainty, because I don't have any problem with removing application-based competitive process, because the former process was, there was only so much money, you had to qualify, and then somebody had to pick, because you always have more applicants than there was money. So yes, there's got to be some criteria. So I'm not concerned about dropping application-based competitive process. I think it was just designed to convey that it's not infinite, that's all.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about creating it, then I just want to be clear in my head that we're not looking at the past at all. We're talking about a new forward-looking community grants program without an eye towards the one that previously existed. Because that had a whole framework and criteria, and there was a needs-based element to it, because whether it was a performing arts group or it was, let's just put it this way, there were some organizations that were very well funded and they didn't really need $500, whereas a local theater company was just starting up, that made or break their whole performance for the year.
Yeah.
So there was that element to it, and it was obviously citizens that made the decisions. So that's the only thing I'm unclear about, is that, are we creating or recreating, or am I reading too much into all this?
Don't you think exploring captures that?
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine.
I mean, your court's going to look at past experience
Right.
as well. I mean, we're
Yeah.
exploring.
Okay, all right, you're all clarifying this for me, that's fine. I got it. It's all part of the record, it's recorded for all time, I got it. The only other thing I would add that did not make it in here is, the word local is not in there. Local not-for-profit organizations. I don't know if we want to be supporting organizations outside of the community. That brings in a whole other
I think that's
level of.
important clarification.
Yes, I think really, it should be a local not-for-profit organization. And we can also define what that means, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's an important
Yeah.
clarification.
I agree.
Greg?
No, I think that's a good change to add local. I appreciate the discussion on the needs-based element, because I think my definition of need would be a little bit different. I think there's obviously value to arts in the community, but I see that as a little bit of mission creep, and I think if that's where this is going, I'm going to be pretty disappointed with it. I think it's another thing when we're talking about things like Meals on Wheels, or if we're talking about family shelter services, or fill in any one of other, a large number of other organizations. But, if we're talking about tax dollars, and we're talking about, the budget doesn't always necessarily include the great financial information that we got tonight. And we've got other priorities that we're looking at, from lead service line replacement to pension funding doubling. And we need to make sure that we're cognizant of all these long-term obligations as well. So, if we're going to reinstate or create or explore or fill in the adjective here, let's make sure that we're doing it in an effort to eliminate a need in the community that is something that perhaps we might otherwise be dealing with.
Well, I'm very glad you said that, because that was exactly my point for raising this, is because the original community grants program was not about, well, it was not limited to this, but it was driven primarily about driving tourism to Downers Grove. That's why it was funded initially with the hotel motel tax. The idea was, you want to tie it all into visitors. So what do you do to attract visitors? You have events and programs, you have art displays, you have live theater performances, you have concerts, you have all different things that would attract people into the town. And a lot of those wouldn't survive without some kind of assistance. And that was probably the majority of it, but there were also other things that I question whether they were appropriate or not, but that's another story. But some of them were, so for example, an organization that provided services to the community, was not arts-based, would have an event, and there would be a contribution to support their efforts so they could have a bigger impact by raising more money that would then benefit the community. But it wasn't just Meals on Wheels. I want to be very clear about that. In fact, that was probably, in fact, it wasn't Meals on Wheels, because Meals on Wheels was separately funded by the village, so it wasn't even, they weren't even an applicant. Which is why I go back to, maybe the best word is exploring, because these are the questions that I don't think we're going to answer tonight. That's for later meetings. That's part of the exploring. But I just want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. The community grants program, I knew very well, was primarily focused on things that would attract people to the community. Not exclusively, but primarily.
And
that's because of its funding source. Now, you change the funding source, you can do whatever you want.
So as it relates
So I think it was the exploring.
as it relates to tonight, though, what that means is that the use of the word need does not really appear in this definition intentionally.
Yes.
Right, and my recollection, and some of this is in private conversation, and some of it's from, other council discussions from before tonight, but it was that part of the reason why this made the list of items was exploring, not just expanding, potentially the line item for Meals on Wheels, but looking at other, need-based not-for-profits in the community. So there are, I think, to your point earlier, Martin, there are perhaps some competing visions or different visions of what exactly.
And if that's all part of the getting baked out and the exploring, then we don't have to go any further into it. But just so we all know that there's different views on this and what it was for, because it was ended because of financial challenges. Different time, different financial situation. The question is, do you reestablish that, or do you do something completely different? But that's the exploring, so I'll stop talking.
I could foresee a program that has a different focus on a year-to-year basis. If there's some difference of opinion about what the needs are, and so I think it's all captured in the exploring.
Okay, fair enough.
Definitely.
Leslie?
Yeah, for the purposes of tonight's meeting, I'm good with the word exploring and cutting out the application-based competitive process and just making it more general. Thanks.
And adding local.
And adding local, of course.
Danny?
Yeah, no, I agree. Adding local and deleting the last sentence, I think, is good for me for tonight.
I'm in agreement with both those.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that description. The next one up for discussion is the description of the Enhance the Downtown Outdoor Dining Program. This project consists of creating permanent public and private areas for use as outdoor cafes. The areas would be aesthetically pleasing. Outdoor cafes would no longer be located in on-street parking spaces surrounded by concrete barriers. Sidewalks would be physically expanded to accommodate areas for outdoor cafes, and some existing on-street parking spaces would be permanently removed. Question, is that the description, the shared understanding of this potential project?
Chris, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is fine. I think my only hesitation when we're this early on is kind of getting into the how a bit, talking about removing parking spaces, and I feel like that feels a bit more discussion for when we're deciding on what we're going to do here. For me, the concept of enhancing the downtown outdoor dining program is, I think, important, and we have to make some, I think, more permanent decisions around that. This felt a little to-do list, and if the remainder of the balance of the council is comfortable with this, I would be okay with it. I just wouldn't want to limit ourselves in how we're thinking about what outdoor dining program might look like. I'll just give an example of, we're talking about one application, but you could close Main Street. There's lots of things we could do. Create a social, to me, an enhanced outdoor dining program or enhancing it, there just feels like there's more options than just adding the sidewalk and making space for a restaurant. So again, this isn't something, I personally think this is something I'd love to take on, but this feels a little limiting, but if the council sees that as just sort of, these are sort of some of the ideas, and we can flush that out later, I'm more than happy to keep it the way it is.
Yeah, for my part, I would keep it the way it is. And I guess if we're going to grab the, controls and then push way down into the 10,000-foot level or something like that, I have no interest in closing Main Street. Not a big fan of closing off streets. No, I think the description is spot on. The only real alternative to the potential of closing off Main Street is to expand the sidewalk somewhere, and that means getting rid of a few parking spots. If you ask me, that's the only way to go.
Leslie?
I'd probably lean more towards Commissioner Gilmartin. There's a part of me that instead of saying, existing on-street parking spaces would be permanently removed, I think we should focus kind of more on the rationale of why. So a big part of that to me is the safety of the pedestrians, access for people who need the wider spaces, and don't want to be bumping into tables, comfort for those tables. So really thinking more about safety, ADA, pedestrian access in the downtown, because I know that's something that I've heard a lot from residents. And I think that needs to be reflected in this. This is actually one of the ones that I had questions on, because to me, this will probably creep into zoning ideas of that, how are we using the alleys, how are we using the streets? I know most of our older buildings can't support anything on the roofs, but anything rooftop related, to me, that's all incorporated into this, and I think that now is the time to have that discussion. I think it would be too narrow of a focus to keep it the way it is here now, and just kind of do an expansion of what we have. I think we really need to think about what we want the downtown to look like in terms of outdoor dining moving forward, and making sure that we're putting an emphasis on safety, both for the restaurants, their staff, patrons, but also the folks who are just trying to walk down the sidewalk. So that's kind of my comments.
What do you think?
This description fits what my thought process was and what I was envisioning. I'd be all for broadening the scope a little bit. I don't know if closing down Main Street is it, but I'd definitely be open to other ideas.
Mike?
Yeah, so I was having some similar thoughts in terms of the safety element. Under no condition, though, would outdoor cafes would no longer be located in on-street parking spaces surrounded by concrete barriers. I want to keep that in there because that absolutely has to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, so but the reason why we're doing it should also be, and this was in my comments that I wrote, is that the safety aspect of this should be explicitly stated in the description. So that's a primary motivation for why we're doing some of these things, other than just making it look nicer, or right. So somehow I'm not going to wordsmith this for you. Sorry, Dave.
No, that's good. But this is exactly the kind of policy direction we're looking for this part of the process. So,
Martin?
I'm not going to add anything to what's already been said, except if there's a linkage definition, I think that enhance the downtown outdoor dining program is something that if we do that, we're necessarily going to be developing a downtown landscape and hardscape plan.
Right.
We're not going to do all that stuff and not
Right.
look at the whole downtown. I realize that you could do a downtown landscape and hardscape plan without doing the dining, but if you're going to do the dining, you're kind of going to do the rest.
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to do part of it and leave the rest looking like.
Right.
Mike, come on, finish that.
Don't.
I'll let you fill in the blank yourself. You're all adults. That's my only comment, is whether there should be some express linkage. I mean, just a practical matter, we're not going to do the one without the other.
Yeah, that was my comment too, whether those should be linked. I think I agree with the idea that it's important to somehow say in here what's driving this, which is both safety and aesthetics. 'Cause that could drive outcomes and processes if you were making sure you were considering both of those, not just one or the other. And this is creep of this conversation for tonight. You know what, why don't we do the next one next?
Yeah.
So I guess I agree with what's been said here. I don't agree with the headline for tomorrow, which is Commissioner Gilmartin wants to close Main Street.
Right.
We meet tomorrow, it's already on Twitter. Sorry, X.
No, I agree with what's on the board, and I also think that Martin's exactly right. This linkage to this hardscape landscape thing is probably not breakable.
yeah, and so I'll repeat back what I think we're hearing is consensus direction on the description is describe the project a little more broadly, right? So it's not just specifically exactly what's here, that might be part of it. Also specifically note the connection of beautification, aesthetics, and public safety, life safety issues, which is a key driver. And because of those change in description, if everybody's head is still nodding there, you can see it does have more of a direct linkage. It's not just specifically doing this with concrete barriers, it's going to roll right into landscape planning.
Yeah.
Capture that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of nodding.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris?
I don't know, if I may, I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
if this
for
is
sure.
the time to discuss it, but one of my comments on the hardscape and landscape of downtown was why that wasn't extended to any of the public places that we would beautify or improve, right? So this was one that I had a question on, just exactly around that.
And I'll take that as the cue, Mayor, to introduce this one, because I think we're starting to talk about it now.
Yeah.
So this one, potential project, is develop a downtown landscape and hardscape plan. This project would consist of developing and implementing a plan to enhance the physical appearance of the public areas in the downtown through landscaping and hardscape materials. The plan would address the type and location of tree, shrub, and flower plantings, the design and location of other landscape improvements such as pavers, knee walls, benches, and other types of seating, street lights, street signs, and other similar improvements would also be addressed.
Yeah.
So there.
We're just going to keep going.
Mhm.
Come back to that, though.
Yeah.
Greg, you want to start this conversation?
I'm good.
Leslie?
I mean, I'm fine with this, just, I guess, maybe the clarification. I assume the reason why we're doing downtown is because it's kind of an SSA and its own animal, right? And so that's kind of why we're singling it out, or it's just a clarification, I guess? Or is it just because
I think
Because
it's the
downtown.
center?
I think
just it's
traditionally
downtown?
it has our
Heart and soul.
Yeah, exactly.
whole
Right.
different environment and a whole different, it's one of the only areas in town that's not exclusively like this, because Fairview we just talked about, but the
Right.
way the parking is on publicly owned assets
Okay.
instead of privately owned, I think is one of the major drivers.
Great.
And the public nature of the shared open spaces, I think the train station spaces, the
Yep.
Vicente Plaza, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes total sense, just to help, I guess, clarify for why it is downtown and not, everywhere, which I assume we will be doing this as we discuss Fairview, so.
Good?
Yep.
Danny?
Nothing to add or change?
Martin?
I have nothing to add, except I have to take this moment to say that the landscaping that's been going in recently downtown looks amazing. Being nothing but compliments about it, looks fantastic. So kudos.
Mike?
Just an anecdote from the past, and since we're talking about our impressions of things, I can remember being part of a group trying to convince past councils that we should plant some trees downtown. The businesses actually wanted them. There was a time when we didn't have any trees along the street downtown, and so we're building on the good work of previous councils, and it's looking fantastic. So I think it's, since it is the heart and soul of our town.
Actually, I like waiting for the train now.
Yeah, right. It sends an important message, right? We're going to be talking about monument signs as well, but there's a number of ways that we communicate to the rest of the world what Downers Grove is all about, and this is one of those ways.
Chris.
Actually, a great segue, and why I was sort of adding or maybe questioning why this was just downtown. To me, I think we've done a ton of great work on the new facilities, the look and feel and the design of what we're doing there. I envision that carried through with some of these monument signs that was part of that. To me, that is the visual brand of Downers Grove. The new facilities is the keystone to that, to me. And leveraging some of that look and feel, certainly throughout downtown where we can, and beyond, feels like the right extension of that for us. So when someone crosses into our town and there's a public space, it connects to who we are in that sort of same, I'll just continue to call it a brand. I think that's important. I think it makes a big difference in how the town is seen. So I'm all for improving and doing whatever we can to help downtown. I think it's clearly has been a area of focus and a lot of amazing things throughout the years, but to me, it also feels like it should be extended into wherever we can. I know that public nodes isn't on the discussion today, but that was something that was brought up, and how we would link that, just, it feels like now, with the new facilities and all of the great design and look and feel and thought that went into that, just to kind of piggyback on that and extend that to where we can around the village, not just downtown, but wherever it's possible.
One of the challenges of this process is each one of these things can start to get much bigger circles. And so like I would think that the question of why downtown, just to have a defined space to start with. I think you're exactly right. The new facility gives us some design clues that we should take and expand throughout the community. But if you're saying what sort of task, what project do you want to accomplish in the next 2 years, developing that plan for one area is certainly a thing. If you said everywhere in town where there's public spaces, it gets to be a lot bigger.
Sure. I guess another suggestion would be, if we are defining the downtown landscape and hardscape plan, I understand that moving into other areas is expanding it, but can we set some sort of like standard that we're basing off of this downtown work that we can then further apply when projects or the opportunity arises, so that we're looking to a look or a feel or a application that we have felt was the right fit for downtown, and using that to inform how we might design and do things elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm all for the downtown. I think this is great, but it feels, it's also there's also other groups that are focused on downtown that we are funding, and so I understand the value, and when we close down Main Streets, it's going to be more valuable. I think I get that. I feel like it's something we should apply, and if we're going to do all the work to select and pick and hardscape and landscape, let's use that as, okay, we got another area, let's carry that through.
Comes a template.
Can I just offer that when we talked about the Fairview focus area before, I put forward the idea that could be an incubator for a lot of wonderful ideas throughout town, and I think that's probably the better model for looking at how we can apply things throughout town, because there we really are. I hate to say starting with a blank slate, but I mean, we haven't had much of a focus on that area. There's a lot of room for improvement there, and that's one of the reasons why we're considering it as a focus area. So I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned there that are going to find great applicability to the rest of the town, and hardscape and landscape is part of that work. Whereas this is something that we're talking about really how it uniquely applies to the downtown area. And so I don't know that there'll be as many lessons learned from this as there would be from the Fairview area.
I just thought facilities was a pretty good starting point.
It is.
Spent a good amount of time. So,
Yep.
But I agree, we can do both.
You feel like
Yeah,
you
I'm
got
gonna
a
ask for
recap?
more clarity, because I think there's a couple concepts. There's this concept where this description is the hardscape and landscape plan for the downtown. Then we heard another concept, which is this should be, I'm gonna make up a word here, don't know if I capture it, a beautification plan for all publicly owned spaces. That's another concept.
Yep.
And then I heard something in between, which was basically starting with this description, but planting the seed, something like in this description, it might say, in the future, as we go to public right-of-way beautification, these designs could be the basis of design for future. Sort of three things out there. I'm just looking for, what do we want this project to be?
Well, I think there's a fourth, this question of is it or is it not separable from the dining? If you're looking at the entire downtown and the use of public space and the redesign and reapplication of that use it doesn't strike me you can do that without doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're not separate.
no.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
I don't think
it was
so.
one of my, I mean, this item should be combined with the downtown dining priority action.
I think Martin captured it really well. You can do one of them. There's one you can do without the other, but there's.
You can't do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's subsumed.
So then I would just, I would say that if we're going to combine this with the downtown dining, I feel it's less compelling because that's a lot to do there, to add, then carry it forward to other places. Let's see what we get done there, and we look at it and say, that's amazing,
Well, I think
we
it's kind
added
of,
as a,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, I think it's sort of part of our DNA is to take the pieces of a project that are particularly good. I think
Yeah.
Whatever the elements might be, and apply them, whether it's Fairview or anywhere else in town. So I would expect that the lessons we learn and the things that we develop that turn out to end up, being really something we can celebrate,
Yeah.
to be applied elsewhere in town.
Let it be the incubator.
Exactly.
So I'm hearing this stays like this, and then when we get further into the actual picking of the projects and putting them in the work plan, it's possible that we'll pick this and outdoor dining as re-described, and if that happens, they kind of merge. But that's sort of jumping way ahead to August 22nd. But as far as,
Yes, it
like,
is.
when we consider what this project is this the shared understanding of this description?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
It's for me.
I think so.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, the next one up is to make sure that we're all understanding the description of the video gaming related project. This project consists of drafting and considering an ordinance permitting operation of video gaming devices for restaurants holding liquor license that allow for on-premise consumption located in areas outside of the downtown. And then we have in the parenthetical, those are the 3 zoning districts that compose the downtown. Items for consideration include the number of gaming licenses available, number of devices permitted at each location, requirements for creating a separate area for gaming, and establishing fees. Mayor?
Leslie, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I am comfortable with this, but as everybody knows from past meetings, I would be comfortable opening it up to any businesses, whether it's in the downtown or not. But again, it's kind of one of those, it was a compromise with fellow council members, and so I am fine opening it up, but if that is the general consensus, then I can deal with areas outside the downtown. But outside of that, all those items for consideration were kind of the big things that I remember us discussing, so all of that I'm comfortable with, so.
Danny?
Yeah, similar to Leslie, I think this fits the description that I was envisioning. Again, I would also probably agree with Leslie also that, I'd be comfortable with it everywhere, but there was I wouldn't quite call it a consensus, because it didn't turn out to be that way, to take it out of the downtown,
I was
but.
being really
yeah,
generous.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm comfortable with the way it's written.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm comfortable the way it's written. I heard somebody talk about perhaps adding the pilot option into that, so I think maybe Commissioner Tully, I think if that's something that would be added into that, that seems like a reasonable addition to me.
Mike?
I too would support the idea that this would be a trial of yet determined length. So, and 1 year was mentioned, but I don't know that we need to decide on that just yet. And then in terms of the items for consideration, I would add to that aesthetics.
Signage.
And leave it at aesthetics.
Okay.
You understand?
Be
Yes, sir.
I'm capturing lots with that.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Got it.
Martin?
I'm not going to say anything because anything I would say would end up drafting the legislation, so. We're not going to draft the ordinance here today. I think that is enough to, everybody understands what we're pursuing. This council already pursued it, so I think everybody understands what this is. The rest is in the drafting the ordinance.
I'm just going to grind my teeth and move on.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then
Can I
is-
pipe up a second?
Yeah, I got an addition.
Oh, did I skip you?
Yeah.
I don't want to hear what you have to say anyway. We're not interested. I'm sorry, Greg.
No worries. No, I mean, on some level, it's probably better to skip me because I'm not going to vote for this no matter how you describe it. But
It's probably Freudian.
the piece of it, I mean, I find the pilot piece of it to be the politician's way out. Once it's in. You're not going to end up pulling it out. Well, let's just be honest about it. And in terms of the downtown piece too, the feedback that we got, or at least that I got, was 10-1, saying don't do this, but if you are going to go and do this, please God, don't put it downtown. I mean, that's really how it ends up, almost exactly being phrased. And that just strikes me as picking winners and losers. Why is Bryan's fundamentally different from another round or Ballydoyle? What is it that's the logical line to draw? And it goes back to that piece of feedback from the community. It goes back to the Downers Grove brand, right? The reason you don't want it in downtown, or folks don't want it in downtown, is that they don't think it fits our community. So why would we say, yeah, but you can go ahead and do it on 63rd Street, or you can go ahead and do it on Ogden or 75th? There's just a total logical disconnect there. I think you got to go all in or all out.
2 words, food trucks. Not allowed downtown. Why?
Where are we parking them? We're losing some parking spaces, I thought.
Well, that's a different issue, but well, look, we're getting into the ordinance here.
What is, hey, hang on.
But 2 things. One, it's the political will, not politician's way out. You can withdraw anything you want. Things have sunsetted in this town before. It's up to the political will of this group. That's what it's down to. It's not a politician's way out. Number 2, we've done things where we have tried things in other places many times. Food trucks is first example. In fact, it was even more limited than it currently is now, and it was done on a pilot basis. Well, there's precedent for this. So, but we're now getting into the arguments about the actual ordinance and the vote, which more important to me is that there actually is a vote.
It's, I don't think this is going to be much of an issue, because I think we can hear ourselves around the table, right? I mean, not to diminish Enza's team, but this is not that much work. It's us actually getting to the
That's
point
right.
of having a vote. That's the work. And so the scope definition, I mean, it matters. It does matter. To Greg's point, I mean, if we should have 5 or so people nodding their head that this is the path we want to pursue, because we could pursue either one. It'd be easy either way. So I think it's an important question. I think I'm hearing everybody that's, not everybody, but I think I'm hearing a majority of the group thinking what's written is what they want to pursue.
I would add the pilot part.
Does anybody else
Fine with me.
want to add the pilot part?
Which would possibly appear as consideration of a pilot program or trial period.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to describe it will be up for discussion if we can do that, right?
I feel like adding the word pilot means like, we're not really sure about this, so let's test it out. And I feel like the test is completed with many other towns. I don't think any of them have ever walked it back. And I feel like if we're gonna do this, one of the main reasons why I think it's essential is, we've got businesses competing against one business on Ogden that's competing against another in Westmont, although that Westmont place is getting $250,000 to their bottom line. Well, they can hire and retain better talent, they can make more improvements to their buildings, and then what, after the pilot, we're gonna take that away from them? Fire all those people you hired?
I've actually talked to the businesses, and they're all fine with the pilot.
Can I interject here? So just in objection to the politician's way out, sort of, and the idea that why do the pilot if, we're not going to back. I have no intention of, if we move forward with this, of somehow going through a trial or a pilot and then backing out. To me, the purpose of doing the trial and the pilot is to better understand how it all works, get the language down in our ordinance, learn some lessons from the first year or two that we're, and then make sure that all the language that we have and the way we're handling it is really the right fit for Downers Grove. So it's more about learning some lessons and being able to tweak versus trying to give myself an out that, I can just satisfy some political constituency.
You don't need a sunset in order to go back and change an ordinance. We do it all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of my argument
Yeah.
is,
I mean, that's
no
really
legislation or ordinance at any level of government is really ever complete, right? Like, we see all, all levels of things. And so to me, if we kind of feel like we're comfortable moving forward with it, then I think we don't necessarily need a pilot to say that we can tweak, licenses and legislation.
So here's
I've got one other piece
that's a fair
though,
argument.
because Danny's logic is exactly what I was talking about earlier. You're talking about picking, the differences between somebody in Westmont competing with somebody on Ogden Avenue. Now you're just going to make that in the village of Downers Grove. You're going to have, the restaurant on Ogden gets an advantage over a restaurant downtown.
So
It just logically doesn't make any sense to me.
from a staff perspective, we wanted to leave this meeting with a shared understanding of the descriptions. And so what I think we're getting at here is all 7 council members know and staff know that if the council puts this project on the list, this is the discussion.
Right.
that's going.
Yeah, this is-
So I feel like
Okay.
we probably don't have to but we wanted to make sure we leave this understanding what the project would be. I think we all have a pretty good understanding what the
This is an
issues
accurate
within the
description.
project.
I think everybody has a really good understanding.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yep. So this one might be the exception to the rule. I think if this gets picked, we all had a preview of what that.
I think so.
Stay tuned to get your popcorn.
You've seen the trailer, wait for the
Yeah,
movie.
right, wait for the movie.
You get popcorn.
This is the process, guys. This is what we're going through on purpose, so we'll just keep going through it. Move on, Dave.
With that one, we get to a project that already had some council input into this description back in June when we were talking about issues and trends. So this is very close for those who've been following us. This description is very close to option 3B that was described before. Not exactly, I'll read it for everybody, but it's close. And we think we've already received council direction on this description, but we wanted to just confirm it here tonight. Environmental Sustainability Plan. This project consists of preparing and implementing an environmental sustainability plan using the Greenest Region Compact Framework as the guiding document. The Environmental Concerns Commission would participate in this process. In addition, the village would consider hiring a professional, full-time staff member specializing in environmental sustainability or policy. A consultant may be engaged to assist with this project. Okay?
Danny, you want to start this conversation?
I have no changes, no questions.
I don't have any changes. Martin?
No change.
Mike?
Can we please change the name of the Environmental Concerns Commission? Can we just say Environmental Commission or Environmental Sustainability Commission, or, I don't like the name.
Well, then you gotta pass the ordinance.
You got it.
It's for voting.
It's a new business
Yeah.
item, right?
Okay, it's a new business item.
Yeah.
Very good.
Not tonight, we can't.
I got
Okay,
you.
Yeah.
okay.
I got you.
All
Moving
right.
forward, we
I
can't.
got you.
All right, walked right into that one. Leaving Ricky at the table.
I would like to pilot a new name for the Environmental Concerns Commission. You were ready to say that, I was going to pilot that too.
Nice try.
Pilots for everyone.
Nice try for the deflection, Lance. Yeah. I'm good with the description.
Chris?
Yeah, so 3B had a reporting component to it, if I remember. That was part of it. I think it was reporting and beyond. This doesn't really talk to reporting or metrics or analysis of how we're doing against the plan. Maybe that's for the discussion as we frame it out. So I'm fine with this as long as we are.
I think the framework suggested
Yeah.
there'd be a reporting, but
Okay,
I want to make sure
that's great.
everybody
That's great. If the
understands.
framework has that in it, then
Yeah.
then that's enough for me.
Yeah, it was baked into me. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good too.
Okay.
We good?
I think so.
Thank you on that one. Okay. This next one is a potential priority action item. Consider a private tree protection ordinance. This project consists of adopting an ordinance with regulations intended to reduce or minimize the number of privately owned trees removed in conjunction with construction or development activities. The regulations would focus on creating awareness of the existing privately owned trees that may be affected by the proposed construction or development activities. The ordinance may be similar to the historic preservation ordinance. Mayor?
Thanks. I'll start on this one. What's written there, I think, is really sufficient. I guess the only question that I have is is there a meaningful difference, and this is really kind of input, probably ends it from you, that we should be thinking through when we reference our historic preservation ordinance, what we're saying there, that's code for voluntary.
Right.
That's what that means. And so is there a meaningful difference in the work required to develop a draft ordinance that's voluntary versus non-voluntary?
Not me.
Yeah, okay. All right. Then we'll, like gaming, we'll end up having these discussions about whether they're voluntary or not, but I think the scope there is correct. The reason we're doing this and what we're trying to get out of it is the point. Martin?
No, this is fine. I mean, most important for me is the last sentence, because that is how you get to something that respects both the objective of this, but also private property rights. I think that's how you thread that needle, and it was done very successfully with historic preservation, very successfully, so there's no reason why we can't explore doing that with trees. I do think, though, that if it was not voluntary, there'd be a lot more work involved, because then you got due process and all kinds of stuff involved.
Well, that was the point of my question.
Yeah.
Because it's material as we go to the next 2-3 weeks and decide what we can and can't do. Part of it is how much work there is and how much we think the backside of how many times do we end up in court. There's other elements to the question.
Right.
Well, in terms of the description, there's more than the writing of the ordinance. So when we put together the work plan, we try to guess, and you put into a Gantt chart, like how many months we think this project will take. So I would like some clarity, as at least now, is the council describing to us a voluntary type approach to this project, or are you describing to us you might consider something else, or you don't know yet? If you don't know yet, that's okay too, but we just want to...
What I was trying to say was that the last sentence is critical to me being interested in this.
Same here.
I think that's what Martin said too. Mike?
So, one, I would like for us to not call it a private tree protection ordinance. I think words matter here, right? So this is more than about preserving or protecting what we have. It's also about trying to do more, encouraging people to plant trees. So, and there's some connection here with another item, priority action item as well. So, but so for one thing, I was looking at it as a tree canopy ordinance or something, and I don't know why we need to have the word private there. If we do look at the connection between this and what we do with our public trees, right, and the public park boards.
So just why it's described like this, 2 reasons. One, we thought this is what we heard when it was introduced as a private tree. And the reason it may have been introduced that way is we already have public tree protection ordinances on our books. And that was the distinction, at least from the staff's perspective.
Okay. Still looking at it more than just protection, right?
Yep.
And then I also, caught on to the last sentence. And so I wish we would be more honest about what we're saying there, instead of saying the ordinance may be similar to the historic preservation ordinance, for those people who might be looking at this work and maybe not understand the nuance of what we're saying there, which is that we're looking to help to promote the preservation and incentivize people to preserve trees, maybe add additional trees, but not outright outlaw somebody from cutting down a tree on their property.
I would consider a private tree promotion ordinance. Protection.
Sure. I get it.
And I don't think there was, just to be clear, I don't think we were trying to hide anything in the last sentence. It was actually trying to reference a framework, a voluntary framework that has been very successful in balancing
I agree.
public interest and private interest.
I understand the intent, and, you know, for the people in the know, we get it.
Yeah,
Chris?
You're done. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Davenport. I think if it's a voluntary program that we're trying to put out there, the word voluntary should be there instead of referencing something that, yeah, those in the know. Those who are looking at this for the first time may not. So we know the framework is there. We can discuss that at the time. But if the idea is, and Mayor, I think you said, that's important for me to be in here, that it's voluntary,
Right.
then let's say voluntary. That would be my 2 cents.
Put it all in caps.
And bold and italicize
With a big digital sign?
Yeah,
on a big.
Oh,
And
we're going
flashing.
all in, aren't we?
I couldn't resist. Greg?
No, I'm good with adding voluntary, that's fine. I think you can throw it in right before historic preservation ordinance.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm good with the rest of the description.
So I just want to be clear, because I'm one of the people who's interested in this one and brought it forward. So I want to be clear in terms of what we say by voluntary. I am interested in, for example, requiring any construction and development activities to have a certified arborist take a look at the site. And so for me, it's a little bit unclear in terms of voluntary, of which part is voluntary. Is it the arborist tree survey, or is it, the fact that they have to comply? Because obviously it's voluntary if they cut down a tree or not, and I'm comfortable with that part of the voluntary. But I really want us to start requiring tree surveys when we do some of these developments, so that we can potentially save as many trees as we can, and if not, have options where, somebody could pay into a fund that either plants new trees or, helps with other environmental causes in the village. We know that we're not going to be getting those low-interest EPA loans, for example, so it could be a potential fund that we could pay into, but I need a little bit more clarity in terms of what everybody else is saying of which part is voluntary. Is it voluntary to do the survey, or is it voluntary to plant the trees?
So the connection between the concepts of intended to reduce by creating awareness in a voluntary manner, we were trying to get at perhaps the project as currently described by the council is voluntary on the resulting side, not the procedural side.
Excellent.
Of what's.
I just wanted to, make sure that was clear.
I don't know if we're going to write that out, but that's what staff is hearing, right?
Okay, great.
So I'll have to figure
That
out.
works for me.
Say that in the project description, but I think we're all.
Yeah. Nothing you said I think is excluded.
Yeah.
Can I point out a potential flaw in the approach to the construction development activities? So, as an architect, I am involved in a lot of projects here in town, and if this was on the books, what would prevent somebody from, since they know that this is a requirement, going and removing a tree prior to them applying for a permit to do the work?
Right.
So, if our goal is to have, and I hate to say it, but sometimes that's part of my job, is to figure out, in what my client's best interest, what they're trying to accomplish, and this would be something I would have to advise, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to.
Right, and certainly that's going to happen, but yeah, this will at least start to.
So maybe we need to think about it in terms of something greater than just construction and development activities for it to be effective.
It's all in the drafting.
Yeah.
But if the description is, in this description, we are restricting it to privately owned trees removed in conjunction with construction and development activities.
As opposed to privately owned trees removed.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
We appreciate the clarity, at least what we're thinking right now in terms of when we create the work plan, what is the description of this project at that time?
I personally cannot imagine the oversight of looking at every single tree down. So to me, these kind of larger scale projects where we're really removing a greater amount makes sense to kind of start there. Otherwise, I think it would be unwieldy, especially to start. So I'm comfortable leaving it with that.
Leslie made the point before that is something we should always remember, that none of these things are unchangeable, right? So if we do this, and it's going to become apparent
Yeah.
that all of a sudden we've got a bunch of people that are leaving one wall at their house so they can do a bunch of work, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll adjust.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a step forward to try and accomplish the things that are targeted as the goals of
Yeah.
the program. I think it's the right step forward, because we also want to bring everybody along.
Yeah.
Right? We'd like to bring
For sure.
even the guys that might cut it down first.
Right.
So,
But don't point at me.
Danny, any thoughts on it?
I have nothing to add to it. I think it's good, the way it's written. I have no problem adding voluntary to it so that it's clear to everyone. I do like Commissioner Davenport's idea of incentivizing planting new trees somehow. But, yeah, no other changes.
So what we're hearing is, be more specific in the reference to the historic preservation ordinance, to use the word voluntary in a way that suggests it's the outcome, not the submittal requirements. Does that work for everybody?
Okay, all right.
I just want to,
No.
add one little anecdote with this too, is that there's actually a connection here with our stormwater management regs as well, in that sometimes in order to build a new house on a lot, your lot's only so large, and because of our requirements, you have to put in so much underground detention, this sort of thing, right? And rework the grade. And sometimes that leads to needing to cut down trees in order to put that stormwater infrastructure in. So I want to point out that there's some conflicting things happening here. And this is one of the reasons why I was making a bigger deal about stormwater management in previous meetings.
Anybody else on the tree subject, private tree subject? You got what you need, you think?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
The next one, for clarity on description, is the one related to an inclusive housing plan or program. This project consists of creating a voluntary inclusive housing plan and/or program intended to increase the supply and availability of affordable housing units and lower the entry points for housing in the village. Amendments to the zoning ordinance, which facilitate the construction of additional affordable housing units, may be considered. The plan and/or program would support the comprehensive plan goal of having a variety of housing options across a range of price points.
Martin, you want to start?
I don't know if I have any comments on the description here. I think we have a pretty good idea of what is intended here, but there's a lot of definitions and metrics and data that would need to be pulled together to do anything, and I think all that comes with the exercise. So if we engage in the exercise, I think all that's going to come out in the wash. I mean, I'm not going to load this up with 20 pages of details, because that's all part of the actual discussion.
Mike?
I think I'm sharing Commissioner Tully's view on this.
Chris?
I'm good with it.
Greg?
I think I'd like to see a specific reference to getting that data. And looking at not just the village, but taking a look at the region around us and the efforts that are going on with DuPage County, and perhaps other parts of northern Illinois. I think it's important to identify it really just more than just what's going on in the village. And affordable housing is much more than a Downers Grove problem to the extent it is a problem in Downers Grove. It's something that I think will require a lot more resources than we have. And we should look at whether it's data or partnerships or anything else that comes along with it with a much more regional scope.
From a staff perspective, that distinction at this point in the process is helpful, because if this project starts with the concept of understanding the housing market in Downers Grove as it relates to the surrounding areas, that probably adds a little bit more time in the proposed schedule and Gantt chart, and whether a consultant is used. So let's connect some dots here. If the council description of this project includes a housing market analysis, Downers Grove price points compared to the region, et cetera, then we'll probably, as a staff, recommend you use a consultant to do that. to get that data as part. So we would appreciate that clarity at this point.
I had that in my notes, I just didn't mention it, so.
Well, I had, thank you, because I had sort of, what I was trying to say is I assumed all that was going to happen as part of this exercise. But we want to be more explicit and put voluntary in all caps and
Flashing lights.
italics. The project is investigating the creation of a voluntary inclusive housing plan. Then you'd have to do all the data in order to.
Yeah.
Because there's metrics and how do you know what you're going to do if you do something actually is going to be successful and have the impact you want, and you can't do any of that unless you have the starting point. I'd assume that was in there, so that's a helpful clarification that
Yeah.
I would suggest something like the project consists of investigating and creating, investigating the creation of, or however you want to put the word investigating.
Yeah.
And understanding the housing market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting data on the housing market, and we'll add if that stays in there, then we'll add the consultants.
There was
Okay.
another nuance mentioned, though, as opposed to in the village, looking at it as maybe more of a regional sort of
Absolutely.
snapshot, right? This, I think, is what you mentioned.
Yeah, because, I mean, I would assume that we would want to take a look at all of that data. Realistically, you know, most of the things that we're talking about are regional problems, whether it be environmental sustainability or trees or whatever the case may be. You know, we just kind of have control over our own municipality. So obviously, you know, I agree that we need that larger data point to understand kind of where we are and to give us the context that we need to move forward. But yeah.
Can I just say, though, I think what it's saying here, though, is that we're looking to increase the supply in the village.
Correct.
So the outcome
Yes.
is village-based.
Yes.
So I don't think that should change.
No, that should not change.
The
That's what
inputs
I was
may
trying to
come
say.
from.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The context, yeah.
Input should come from regional, and I'm fine with that.
Right.
Well, I would say you don't know if you really want to increase it. You don't know what your data says. We don't know. So we may or may not. I mean, investigating the possibility of creating for all those reasons, but your data might end up driving you to not feel like that was a necessary action to take. We don't know.
Right.
Right.
We don't know what we don't know, so.
Might.
Thank you, Donald Rumsfeld.
In terms of,
But I mean, to Dave's point, this is a little bit like, I don't remember what subject the first one we were talking about was, does it include, I guess it was Fairview, right? Does it include the inclusion of consultants and ad hocs and data collection? Because it does dramatically change the way the lens we look through all these in as we try and prioritize stuff.
yeah, and the length of
Yeah.
time when we
The
lay
duration, right.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to need public input, absolutely.
You know,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I guess, to me, adding the idea of a consultant, we could add that to pretty much everyone. I assumed that was part of what the work plan would come, like, you would look at what we're looking for, and you would say,
Here's what I
okay,
need.
this is a big
Yeah.
And then we
project.
reflect it in the
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
And sometimes if we can tell in the description.
If we have an appetite for it, or if it's something,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, if
okay,
we know
that's
right
fair.
now that
But
staff
to
doesn't
me-
have the
Yeah.
time of day to do a market study, like if you're asking
Yeah.
for
Right.
one, then we'll put it in the description.
Okay.
But to your point, Commissioner, absolutely, the budget, you'll see it in the budget that comes that supports the work plan.
Yeah, so if we need a consultant to get the data, yeah, of course, I would say add that.
Yeah.
Part of what we're doing here is obviously to get to the point where we have this work plan, right? But
Yeah.
part of it also is, although it seems tedious tonight and will seem tedious for the next 3 weeks, but part of it also is to end up with descriptions of what we're doing that the public understands what and why, you know? And so that's part of what we're doing tonight, is just talking about these things in a way that establishes a public record, and we talk about whether we may or may not include a consultant, and what might drive that decision. But the fact that if we do, it drives different periods of time when people should expect action, that kind of thing.
Based on what we're hearing so far, staff will make a couple of changes to make it explicit that it starts with a data collection and analysis and probably needs some help. Perfect.
Yeah.
That was very helpful to us.
Excellent.
You have anything, Dan?
No other changes, no additions.
Okay. All right, we good?
I think Commissioner Davenport was just talking about this potential project regarding residential stormwater storage regulations. This project would amend the existing residential stormwater storage regulations that were enacted in 2017. The amendments address additions to existing houses. Regulations would vary by zoning district and the size of the subject property or amount of impervious area, and would offer additional flexibility in meeting the requirements. Regulations may be tied to the preservation of existing trees, recognizing that trees assist in the management of stormwater runoff.
Mike, you want to start?
Why me?
Because Martin started the last one. It worked like a champ.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, I think that the regulations that we have right now were well-intentioned and have served us pretty well. But, you know, there's some tweaks needed, and so I kind of alluded to that in the tree conversation. And I don't think this would take a whole lot of work. So, but in terms of the description up here, I think it pretty well captures why what I think we ought to do with this. I did want to share that I have clients that larger lots, so large addition greater than 400 square feet. They've got to put in the underground detention, which or two, and in some areas in town it really makes a lot of sense, and in other areas of town it just doesn't. And the reason this is a big deal is because there's a tremendous cost that comes with this. And this is my own experience, right? But typically we're seeing $20,000 to $50,000 worth of work between the civil, your soft costs and your hard costs, and when it's being done on a say really large lot in R1, R2, maybe even R3 district, where there hasn't been and there's not projected to be much issues with flooding, that work is really, it's not adding any value to the construction. It's not really having a great effect. If we could take those funds and magically spend them somewhere else in town where it would make more sense, I think the impact would be much greater, and the residents would appreciate some relief in the cost. So this is, what I've mentioned before, a fee in lieu of doing some of the work, or some incentives about saving trees instead of, so the flexibility. I don't know that everybody around the table here is really understanding what this is all about, and that's, I've already said, I think the description pretty well, I agree, it pretty well captures what I'm seeing, but just the rationale behind it and maybe the urgency for it, right? Because the amount of addition or remodel work, and to be clear, I don't make any money on the design of any of this stormwater management work. The civil guys are doing that. So this isn't about creating more work or less work for me. This is about the practicality of what we're doing, the effectiveness of what we're doing, and the cost to our residents. And so I would really like to see some changes along these lines. I think our residents would appreciate a reduction in the cost. And this really, there's a ton of precedent for us to vary some of our requirements here, just like we do. We have different zoning districts. We have R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, 6 districts, and with those come different setback requirements, different lot coverage restrictions, different height restrictions. So I'm just looking for a little tweaking of what we're doing to make it a little more effective and to stop making people necessarily, I've seen pictures, I think you have seen pictures of situations where a tree has died because somebody hacked off a bunch of roots that were going into a neighbor's yard, and chances are that tree, the tree that came down was taken down for the sake of taking care of stormwater management. So these things are kind of in conflict, and if we could do some tweaking here, I think it would be a big help. So that's my lobbying to all of you why I want this in advance of the August 22nd meeting.
Chris?
Sorry.
Take it up.
Thank you for the latitude, Mayor.
I'm looking forward to hearing the same thing in August, Mike.
I won't. You've heard it.
You know, we're going to discuss the merits of this then. I am interested, I think, to learn more about what the problem is that we're fixing with this. So if this seems fairly narrow in terms of amendments, if they're just additions to existing houses, we're talking, right, we're not talking about all. So if that's the nature of what is looked for here, it seems to capture that in my mind. So I'll save my thoughts on it for next time, and looking forward to learning a little bit more about this if it does go through. But wording for me seems fine if based on what you just said. So I'm good with it.
Greg?
I guess I lived the flip side of it, because the large lot next door to me saw a very large addition, and if not for the cisterns that were put in, I wonder, you know, what my basement would look like on a regular basis. So, you know, I'm interested to hear more, but yeah, I have my skepticism, and I'll save it for the 22nd.
Appreciate that.
Leslie?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind of Commissioners Gilmartin and Jose. From what I understand it, this, you know, makes sense to me. I do think it would likely be a little bit more work than what we're thinking, because in reality, even if you're saying it's a large lot and there are impacts, you don't necessarily know all the things that are going to happen downstream. So I think I would caution to say that this is going to be small, because I think it'll turn larger pretty fast. But from a description perspective, I think this makes sense. Thanks.
Danny?
I tend to agree with Commissioner Davenport quite a bit. I mean, the description is fine the way it is. If that's all we're discussing tonight, then I can leave it at that. But I, for one, can speak to, I also had to put in 2 of these basins, and from what I'm told, you might know more than me, but the engineers might know a little more, but on a lot that's a half acre that can consume all this water, these are pretty ineffective, and that money that was spent to put these in could be used elsewhere in town that would be more effective for the whole community. But yeah, I guess we'll discuss that another time.
Just to be clear, the cost is not like an accidental thing. It's not like, oh crap, this turns out to be expensive. We had modeling when we did this, so that's fully within what everybody was expecting cost to be. The description question I have has to do with this additional flexibility component. There's a fundamental premise here, which is that we're moving away from impermeable area to lot size in terms of the intent of the method of regulation. It seems like, and I'm wondering if I'm reading that right. So we're talking about would vary by zoning district and size of the subject property. Right now, we're really using as a metric, we're really focused more on permeable or impermeable area.
So it says both.
So it says both, because it was Commissioner Davenport, I think, who raised this on the 18th, and staff thought we heard both concepts at play. One concept is just plain old size, that's why you were referencing R1, R2, right? Soon to be bigger lots. But also, I thought it was an also amount of pervious versus impervious in the neighborhood on the lot, right?
Sure.
Where is that?
I just
Amount of
threw it in.
pervious area.
Well,
But I think
no, I know, but that's not talking about change. That's maybe I understood that the set of regulations would be defined by the existing conditions. That's not what we do now. That's
correct.
There's a fundamental change there. So no change in impervious would affect the regulation of this anymore. Am I understanding it correct? Mike, you can help me.
No change in pervious?
So
you're talking about like a net change? I mean,
there's a zoning district size and an existing impervious area. I'm hearing that a change in impervious area would no longer be the function of our regulations. Is that the goal?
Not explicitly.
No? Okay.
Can
Okay.
I I just jump in real quick, because I'm getting a little confused here, and I think it's the wording, and that's what I think we're here to.
Yeah.
to-
that's what we're here
Right.
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand where we would end up regulating on.
Yeah, so that says regulations would vary by zoning district and the size of the subject property. So those, to me, are two factors that would impact it. But then in parentheses, it says amount of pervious area, which could be a third factor that could impact it.
But not change in.
That, I'm not following what you mean by not changing it.
It's
I'm
a-
just, as a lay person, I'm trying to understand, are we looking to look at it by zoning district, by size of property, or by pervious area, or a combination of those?
I think the intent of this is a combination.
So staff can
Okay.
tighten up on clarity,
Yeah.
just by the way you
Yeah.
wrote the sentence.
Yeah.
So we could do
Yeah.
that no matter what, right? That's the
Yeah,
only it's not
yeah.
in there, but then we're still back to,
The regulations, I think regulations going forward, if any changes in regulations need to include, changes specifically include changes in runoff characteristics. That has nothing to do with lot size, has nothing to do with impervious area. It has to do with basin shape, site, soil. It has nothing to do with lot size. And one of the challenges is, this is a question about what means we're going to use to regulate. So I hate to have us spend a bunch of time to select a new means of regulating if I think that's disconnected from the effects.
So if I could ask it to say that back to you, you're saying that the regulations that zoning district, size of property, or pervious area aren't related to the effectiveness or how we would approach this?
No.
They're not, like, that would be using a factor or a data point that is irrelevant, for maybe too strong a word, to
Zoning is
what the
certainly
effectiveness would be.
irrelevant. Zoning is certainly irrelevant.
Is irrelevant.
Yeah, it doesn't make any
Yeah.
difference
I
in
would
physical
argue that.
characteristics of the site, so it doesn't matter at all. The impervious area is the biggest factor.
Okay.
Your site size is likely immaterial as well, because it's the detailed conditions of the site that matter. A big site, small site, you can have all kinds of different characteristics.
So then, does this might then capture what your intention was with this in terms of, because it sounds to me, this is saying zoning district is a factor.
Yeah.
This is saying
Right,
lot
and
size
that's-
is a factor.
You're
So that's
saying
your-
it better than I was.
Okay.
I don't really want to spend any time and effort trying to regulate stormwater based on zoning or site size.
so from my perspective, I think we've described the project as it was presented, and we're hearing a council member say, if that gets on the list and goes forward, might have some objection to
Thank you.
changing.
Actually, you're
Right.
reeling me back in, which is a
Yeah.
good thing.
And you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
you could remove zoning district from this.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
to me, that's, I was using that as a way of illustrating different, relative lots, because generally speaking, the R1s are larger than the R2s, are larger than the R3s, are larger than the R4s.
So you're using
And
it as a
so,
proxy.
but it's really,
I see.
it's a proxy for
Okay,
talking
doesn't
about the
matter.
size of the.
Got it.
I see.
Yeah.
Did we capture that correctly though, Mayor? and
Yeah, and
council?
I appreciate you reeling me back in, Dave. That was, I headed down the idea of trying to close Main Street, and that wasn't tonight's conversation.
Just the pervious area of Main
Right.
Street.
Yes,
Right.
just the pervious area,
Okay,
right,
so-
exactly.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of cleanup here to capture the concept of this
The-
discussion.
Yes,
Got
yeah.
it.
The zoning, removal of zoning is kind of
Yeah.
important.
It's a big
Yeah.
deal.
Okay.
Got that.
Martin?
No, I fully appreciate that the dishes on the menu are being described so that we know how they've been prepared. It doesn't mean we're going to order them.
Understood.
Somebody write that down.
Well said. Fantastic. All right, we good to go on
Yep,
the next
think so.
one? Keeping with that analogy, as we get into the final five or so of the night that staff will present, potential priority action item of develop neighborhood conservation districts. This project would consist of creating neighborhood conservation districts. Existing desirable attributes and elements which establish a desirable neighborhood character, such as house size, building heights, building setbacks, specific house attributes like porches, etc., those would be identified. Regulations or provisions intended to preserve and enhance the desirable attributes and character would be developed and applied to specific neighborhoods. This could be a voluntary process. this project may consist of a zoning overlay district.
Chris, you want to start?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add here. Thanks. Looks good to me.
Greg?
I would change could to
To would.
At the second to last sentence.
This one?
Yep.
That's the one.
Works for me. That change works for me. I'm good.
Reading my notes.
Dan?
Yeah, no changes.
I brought my telescope.
Is that what's going? Seriously.
Okay. Martin?
My only question is whether we need to add some kind of investigation or assessment. And I realize we would be identified in there, but this is where I'm coming from. We have always had this challenge with a phrase that appears in all of our land use regulations, which is consistent with the trend of development in the neighborhood. No one has ever been able to identify what a trend of development is in any neighborhood in Downers Grove, because it is so eclectic. So I would want to put a lot of front end. How are we even going to define what is a neighborhood character?
But house size, building heights, building setbacks, specific house attributes like porches. If you're on a street with a bunch of 2-story homes, maybe there shouldn't be any 1-story or 3-story homes. I don't know. And it would be up to.
But over what time period?
Sure. Okay. Are you an attorney?
I also play one on TV.
Yeah.
But I mean, you get my point.
I get your point.
So all I'm suggesting, and I'm not arguing with what this is.
Yep.
I'm just we
Right.
add some sort of
Investigating.
assessment or survey component to it, because that has always been the challenge in Downers Grove,
Yep.
is that the neighborhoods are so eclectic and they change. Trying to say what it is half the battle. I'm not saying it can't happen, but that's all. That's my only comment.
The exercise also might prove that it's just not a practical thing for us to do. We might maybe put it to bed.
I've been trying to define trend of development in the neighborhood for 20 years.
So is this another investigating?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right
I agree.
word, maybe it's assess,
I agree.
Yeah.
survey, but there's gotta be some baseline.
They'll have nice words for it. Staff will have better words than we do.
Okay, so there are two things.
More syllables.
That second could to would, and then this concept of investigation and a neighborhood assessment would be, if this gets selected, it starts there, it doesn't jump right into
Yeah.
doing
Right,
it.
yeah.
That's right.
Always.
Okay.
Anything else on this one?
Okay. This potential priority action item has to do with standard street cross-sections. This project consists of reviewing the existing design standards for village streets, curb and gutter, sidewalks, streetlights, etc., and considering changes to these standards. The project would result in an updated set of standards that would be applied when improvements are made to village streets. Okay.
Greg?
No, I'm good.
Leslie?
I kind of have a hard time separating this from the bike and pedestrian plan and feel like they're like inextricably linked, and that I don't know if they're separate things even necessarily. So
It could be.
Okay.
It could be, so.
if we didn't want to do
Right, so you
pursue a
could-
bike and ped
You
plan.
could probably do a bike and ped plan, which is what we're gonna talk about next.
Yeah.
And leave a lot of these street standards alone. You could probably do some street standard changes and not pursue a bike and ped plan. So,
pieces and parts of them,
Exactly.
sure, but things like sidewalk, streetlights are going to be applicable for both. So for me,
Exactly.
yeah, they're tied together. So I'm comfortable with this, but I think it's going to be linked to some of our other projects.
The reason I would disagree is the curb and gutter piece.
That's the only piece, yeah, right, that wouldn't be necessarily connected.
got it.
Danny?
I'm comfortable with this description.
Yeah, I think you're right. If we decide to go forward on either of those bike and ped plans, we likely could choose to make this part of it. If we would decide not to do those or do those on some narrow scope, this takes on a life of its own that's different.
Yeah.
There's also a kind of historic policy embedded here that's a question, which is when we do things, do we replicate, when we replace, do we replicate what's there, or do we change it? Right, there's been, we've all been up here long enough to see sidewalks as a question mark, right? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, depends on how people react. And that's true of, to Greg's point, curb and gutter as well.
Yeah.
And so the one place this separates itself from the bike and ped plan or transportation plan is in the ongoing, never-ending work of continuously repairing and rebuilding streets. Even if we have a bike and ped plan, that will likely have some path forward, right? There would be other things going on that might not be part of that plan that still could be affected by such a thing. So that's where it separates, but it certainly could end up part too. Martin?
I understand how the dish is prepared.
Perfect.
Should we add striping to the curb and gutter sidewalks?
Yes.
Streetlights?
Yeah, that's a great example of what would be considered if we were to take this.
Sure.
When we have
What brought that to mind?
dashed.
That's in the et cetera.
Yeah, I want it listed instead. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, is there, do we think that there's a possible tie-in with tree preservation as well? We're talking about a street cross-section, we're really talking about a cross-section through the public right-of-way, right? Which would extend all the way through the sidewalks.
Yeah.
And would be where our public trees.
So certainly, existing standards speak to spacing
Yeah.
of
Okay.
public trees.
Yeah.
So yes, that is definitely in there for sure. And we'll make that explicit too, I think.
Anything else, Mike?
That's it.
Chris?
Yeah, I think this is fine. I agree with Leslie. I think this is absolutely linked. But I also understand it's a Venn diagram maybe more than an overlap or a total same. So I think for me, it would be hard for me to see if the bike plan stuff moves forward not including this. But I understand how this is a bit different, and I think it's worded fine.
You good?
Yes. Okay, so we're getting near the final ones that staff has planned to present tonight. And we get to two that are they're very similar, but there could be very distinctive differences in them. So I'm going to read them both and then turn it over to you, Mayor. They both have to do with bike and ped plan update. One is, this is the one that the staff had in the report before we did the July 18th meeting. It just says this project consists of updating the 2013 bike and ped plan. The Transportation and Parking Commission would assist with this, and a consultant would be engaged. So this one is sort of based on, just do what we did in 2013. This one came from a council member and really was talking about taking it steps further. This project reads, this would result in transforming the village into a pedestrian-first community. The project would be more than just an update to the bike and ped plan. It would contain a clear vision to guide village decisions and improvements related to pedestrian affordances and non-motorized transportation. The plan would focus on all forms of non-motorized transportation and actions which could be implemented on a systemic basis. A key deliverable would be a plan indicating the type and scope of improvements made to existing streets, and there's the tie-in that Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit was talking about. A consultant may be engaged to assist with this project. I'm just starting with this one because this one here is just a very generic statement of an update. So,
Leslie, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, this makes sense to me. I don't know that I would necessarily say that I'm looking for this project to result in a pedestrian-first community. I think this is another one of those areas, like we've been talking about, where like we are part of a greater there's context around us. And I think this would be a really great first step into kind of transforming what this area could look like. But realistically, if people are coming in here from other communities, they're still going to need, the access to park and whatever. So I would suggest maybe more pedestrian friendly and maybe not as much pedestrian first. But I agree with all of the components that kind of fall under that. So I can see that it's more than an update to the bike and ped plan. I can see that this is much more about being able to systematically go through our improvements instead of the one at a time that we've been doing, and that is bigger than just the bike and ped plan. So I see how this, is a little bit more comprehensive, but I would just rather err on the side of being cautionary and not necessarily say pedestrian first, just knowing the environment that we're in, both from a climate perspective and from, where we're situated, just a geographical perspective.
Danny?
Yeah, I like that, but I don't have any other changes to the rest of it. I like the pedestrian friendly instead of first, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll weigh in on the friendly versus first. I think this is intended to be, I shouldn't speak for Chris, I suppose, but I think it's intended to kind of take our bike and ped plan and be a little more visionary with it, and a little more long-range looking. And with that in mind, I guess I like the idea of trying to be pedestrian first. I think, as opposed to friendly. There's some realities that are all going to set in, right? We're all going to bump up against realities right away. It's not like running down this road would suddenly eliminate parking anywhere. It would say in much stronger words what our goals were, and I think that's the difference between this and the bike plan. Is how strong and forcefully are we saying what we want to do?
And staff picked up on and tried to reflect more emphasis on outcome and deliverable over time.
Yeah.
We did a pretty good job in the 2013 plan. We hit about half to 60% of the recommendations, but a lot of the bigger ones were challenging, right? So that was the intent here, to focus on results.
I like that.
The scope or definition part of this that I think might be missing is when we talk about what key deliverables are. I think that ought to say something about kind of like the Fairview district, some conversation reported, intended, right? Something always changes, but ideas about time and finance, because they're inextricably linked to a long-term vision.
Mayor, you're proposing the description which specifically addresses planning crew.
When we talk about deliverables, we talk about funding sources and timeframes.
And did you also mention public input?
I did not, but I probably should have. Yeah. I guess I feel like when I read this, I feel like it's a bike and ped plan that's designed to be transformative to the community, not just an update. Yeah. And that necessarily, in my mind, includes discussions of finance and timeline and additional input. Martin?
I have a very clear understanding of what this item consists of.
So, I think we should, part of the focus here should be, there should be a regional piece of this. And so, this item was actually a recommendation in the current comp plan. And I quote, "While the recommendations of the village bikeway plan and the trails and transit plan provide a solid foundation, the village should create a trails master plan that incorporates the recommendations of the bikeway plan in addition to input from the Park District, DuPage County, regional agencies such as CMAP, and pertinent input from the community." End quote. Focus being given to a regional application here where we're connecting to and amplifying the effectiveness of paths in adjoining jurisdictions. So we're not an island.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
there's so somehow something about a regional sort of
Connection.
Connectivity.
I like that.
And that was part of the original vision.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of finance and timeline, that feels like we could add that to anyone. Like those are all considerations for these things. So, well aware of, I think, where that falls, and I think even the regional stuff is important. I don't think we can do it without including those. You've all said it, so I feel like I'd just be repeating, but this is more than just an update to the plan. I don't want it to sit in a drawer for another 10 years, so I'll get on that in August. But the idea here is that there is, very clear outcomes and the word that's important for me is the implementation. So I agree with all the public engagement around this. I certainly think we need to leverage some outside sources who have closer on this ground. I'm well aware of the limitations that we may have as a village in terms of how we're laid out and things like that. But to me, it's important to get a much clearer vision of what it could be. And I view this the same way I view the Fairview plan. It's a decades thing.
Yeah.
This is not put a bike lane down the middle of Main Street and call it a day. This is, because it'll be closed.
It'll be closed.
It'll work well. It'll be better.
And that's when we can reopen St. Joe's Creek.
So this absolutely captures it for me. I'll just, on the pedestrian first thing, because we are talking about words, to me, that's the vision, that's the decades-long vision.
That's fair.
Friendly is,
Yeah.
it just feels a little
That's fair.
softer to me.
So that's where we'll need a little bit, it's a meaningful word, right?
Yeah.
If you tell somebody you're trying to do a pedestrian first plan versus pedestrian friendly.
Right.
I'm sure if this gets picked, we'll go through that.
Yep.
But we would appreciate council direction right now on whether it's first or friendly.
I mean, I think, it just, for me, knowing that it's down the line and recognizing that we're a part of, kind of this larger system, I'm fine if that's just kind of like our visionary goal, as long as we have that context in there. Yeah.
I like friendly better, but I think that because I think the rest of what Chris is talking about is captured, and it's, God, I'm tired, is captured in the rest of the description.
Yeah.
So we'll
I'm
leave
comfortable
it-
with it, yeah.
We'll leave it as first, and if I'm hearing the council right, we'll add the concept of regional
Connectivity.
connectivity.
Mhm.
Sounds great.
Okay. Good there, everybody?
Good. Okay.
And then the last one that staff has a presentation on is this one, a potential action regarding parking and open space regs for new commercial developments. This project consists of amending the existing parking requirements and open space regulations for new commercial developments. It will result in a reduction of required off-street parking spaces and an increase in the amount of required open space and/or landscaping areas. Mayor?
Danny, want to start?
Not really.
Not
but
really?
I don't have anything to add to that.
I appreciate your candor.
This is, I think, should say new commercial developments and redevelopments. There's a distinction there.
Yes.
And that, I know that was, this is one that I was trying to throw in the hopper, and
Yeah.
it's meaningful.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider our existing footprint of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's getting a little smaller.
So significant redevelopment projects would trigger this if we.
We'll figure out how to define that, but yeah.
That's where most of the,
Right.
that's where most of the work is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Martin?
So I want to go back to my assess or investigate comment here, because this really, to me, is a much bigger issue. And it's about looking forward to what is the future of transportation in our area. That was an issue before the pandemic hit, and you had the tremendous rise in flex hours for people going into the office. I know some of that's coming back. So this is even before the pandemic. There was a trend that with rideshare services and other alternative modes of communication, that you have fewer people that are driving somewhere, leaving a car, sitting all day somewhere, getting back in that car, and going to where they're at. There's a lot more things that are moving around, and parking has changed nationwide. So I don't want to necessarily say that we need to be the tip of the spear, but I would be very interested in knowing what are the 5, 10, 15, 20-year trends for parking and transportation nationally and in the Midwest, because I recall back in the day that there were some communities that were scrapping plans to build more parking because of changes in usage in transportation, and even reallocating existing parking structures for other uses. So I'm very interested in this topic, but I think that there's a much bigger issue here that I think we could tap into, not to start talking about the how,
we start tapping into both regional and state and even national municipal organizations to provide some input on this. But let's not think of where we are today, let's think of where we are 15 years, 20 years from now.
Mike?
Excellent, excellent points, Commissioner Tully. I'm thinking that this one may warrant us adding a little bit of language about the why, right? I mean, because there's nothing in there about why we're doing this, and to be fair, you know, that doesn't exist in some of the others either. But here, I think it matters because to me, this is about, you know, a goal of improved aesthetics, more green space, you know, less issues with heat islands, which incidentally was something in the comp plan about the heat island effect. If you take a look, talks exactly about this, and green spaces being able to absorb water and reduce the effect of heat islands. So this item could also be tied to the public nodes and commercial areas conversation we'll have. And, you know, I could see some opportunities for some public-private partnership things happening here. So I don't know how to capture all that in the description and how much of that we should, but I think the why is important. So, the aesthetics, reducing the amount of pavement, creating some more green spaces, and creating some places for people to, and this is where the connection to the public nodes comes in. I mean, it just seems to me it's like so interconnected. So I don't know what you want to do with all that.
Well, we'll see what happens once we go around the room.
All right.
I think mine are maybe just more questions. I think is the purpose of this is to reduce the number of required off-street parking spaces. Okay.
More tree opportunities.
Is it an exchange of pavement for non-pavement area versus just a reduction in parking requirements? That, for staff, is a key.
So, yeah, it's not just reducing the spaces and then building a larger footprint building. It's reducing the requirements in exchange for open spaces and landscaping.
Yeah.
Is it, are we also intending to dictate, well, I guess maybe this might be a conversation for later, but I guess maybe help me understand what an open space is that isn't landscape, that isn't parking.
Maybe we're a little obtuse here in our description,
Yep.
but our thinking was, in our current code, there's a requirement for a specific design at the end of a parking row or so many spaces, and then it's
Sure.
like this landscape area. And then we also have an open space requirement, which is general green. Doesn't
Okay.
necessarily have to be in the end cap landscape. So
So like a
could have been a little
percentage?
more precise, but one, it refers to the two different types of
Okay.
green.
But to your point, Chris, I mean, I actually saw this as a reduction in the number of parking spaces required per square foot in a building, depending on the.
Right, that's how I originally read it.
With an and, though.
But the and
right?
is to, okay.
Yeah, it's
More
not,
open space rather than.
certainly my intention
Yeah.
was not to allow for, it was to create more green and open space.
Sure.
And it was for the things Mike was citing. It was also, when we do evaluations of our community from a tree standpoint, we look generally at three areas. We look at commercial space, public space, and private space. And the commercial is an identified component of that, and this would help us over time improve that. And
Okay,
it
and
affects, water runoff and as well, and
Which is my next question then, are we also trying to enhance, so we talked about pervious areas, or like leveraging different types of even hardscape or whatever the lot is made of, are we, is that part of this initiative too, to like
it was not.
use paver, no, pervious paver or anything, now this is just cutting back parking spaces and, okay,
One of the things that we do is we drive a required amount of parking,
yeah,
and that sort of de facto drives the green space. on a lot of sites. So this is trying to adjust
I
that
see.
ratio.
Got it. Okay.
If you look at the sea of parking at 75th and Lamont Road, I mean, that's a direct result of our requirements for the number of parking spaces you have to have for the amount of square
And the
footage.
demolition of a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stuff that used to be in there that
Right,
they,
they-
it wasn't code required, but
Right.
they did convert it
Wow.
over.
Yeah.
So-
Both of those things.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's probably good enough for me. I just wanted to make sure I understood that, so, thank you. I have nothing further.
Greg?
Now you can go ahead and skip me.
Oh, this time, all right. Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one makes a lot of sense, and I, again, see immense tie-ins with, a sustainability plan as well as a bike and ped plan, because the idea is that this is a larger part of trying to encourage people to use motorized vehicles less frequently. So it makes sense to me, especially in the current environment. I think I just kind of assumed the data and research that Commissioner Tully was speaking of would be a part of this, because I can't imagine us doing this without looking at the data and the research first.
Analyzing
So
the parking demands,
absolutely, yeah. And, we've kind of, I don't think any of us can necessarily predict where things are going post-COVID, because it's been so strange, but we can start to see some trends emerging now that we're, a couple of years out of hunker down mode. But yeah, so this makes perfect sense to me, and like I said, I think it's really linked to a lot of other things that we're talking about, so it makes sense. Makes sense to cover it with everything else.
I guess we're done.
So on that one, we heard of the changes we'll make is this idea of not just new commercial developments, but
Yeah,
significant
definitely.
remodels and redevelopments, and also the data collection of trends and issues is the backbone.
Yeah,
Beyond just Downers Grove.
Yes, right.
of course, yeah.
Did I miss anybody there?
I don't think so.
Oh, I thought, sorry.
You got something else, Chris?
No, I didn't know if Danny
Well, I
was
was
given an
gonna-
opportunity.
Didn't you start off saying you didn't have anything to
Yeah, I
say?
didn't at the time,
Yeah,
but
we
I
started
thought
that.
of a question as, so I totally understand the encouraging the green spaces, but if amending it in this way, what if somebody needed or wanted more parking? Would they then also still be required to have the additional green space that you're proposing?
Something we'd have to talk about.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Great question. Oh my God.
And there's a way we handle that. I mean, we would have potential opportunities for that as exists today.
Our code already contemplates that in several places.
Yeah.
I won't go into it now, but
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
I think it would be in there. Okay, so we've been at this for about a couple hours. Traditionally, at the couple-hour mark, we take a assessment of where do we want to go next. It happens to coincide with the end of the list of the ones that staff was prepared to present, because those were the ones where we had 2 or more council members submit questions or suggestions on the description. There, we talked about making sure that the council had the opportunity to bring forth any of the other, which are now 16 that we didn't go through. We are prepared, we have slides for all of them, and it's at the pleasure of the council.
Yeah, we do want to make sure we leave here tonight without any pressing questions on any of the items. This was a first pass because it seemed like where there were known questions. But does anybody have any particular clarity, kinds of things they want to seek on any of the other items?
No, I view this as
Martin,
important.
you know what's on the menu?
I know it's on the menu, and it was important that the people in the kitchen knew how the things were prepared to be prepared.
Going forward, that analogy is one of the easiest to understand, so thank you for helping us with that.
My work is done here.
I
Chris,
just
you got
think, just for a point of clarity, I don't know if you were going to mention this, Dave, but just in terms of the difference between the action item and the priority action item as it was listed in the report.
Yeah, Commissioner Gilmartin pointed out that we were a little inconsistent in our wording in the table. On the far right column, sometimes it said potential action items, sometimes it said potential priority action items. We did not intend to make a distinction there.
Yeah.
We were trying to convey that all 30 of these, actually 29 of them, staff identified were potentially on the list for discussion. We appreciate Commissioner Gilmartin bringing that forward. The only one that staff thinks is not a potential priority action item because we are already going to bring it to you as its own project in the budget,
Yep.
is the gateway sign.
Yeah.
So whether or not you give us more direction, it is coming. I've seen
Yeah.
the work started on that already.
That's great. Yeah.
Anyone else?
So,
Okay. It's a long process. Jump in.
Well, I was just
Oh,
thinking,
yeah,
on one
this is
thing,
why we're
on
here.
on the public nodes, I mentioned this in the staff meeting, but we wanted to install public nodes in commercial areas such as Ogden Avenue, 75th Street, and Butterfield Road. But I think it'd be important that the public is able to get to those public nodes, and we don't even have sidewalks that connect all the way down Ogden. So would that be included in, somewhere in there?
So, I don't know the answer to that question. The concept here was, we have public spaces, and Chris touched on a little bit, that are, some of them not real well driven, not real well structured to be usable by the public, that's one thing. And then we have other places, I'm thinking of, if you drive up and down Acton Avenue, you can find some street segments that we own that don't actually go anywhere. There are some spaces out there that might be better used to create an environment, not like downtown, that's impossible in Ogden, but that creates an opportunity for charging stations or public spaces.
Everybody okay with adding the concept of access to the nodes is important in this description?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a really nice node, but you can't get there.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'm looking around the table, we look kind of out of gas. Especially that guy. We do appreciate everybody being here, and we want to hear from you guys as well, so if you've got something that you'd like to add to the conversation, just wave, and Laura, why don't
Actually,
you
just a
start?
question. Could you clarify what's going to happen on the 8th, and then not on the 15th, and then on the 22nd?
Absolutely happy to do that.
Thanks.
So right all the way back to the beginning of the slideshow here, and we'll talk about next steps, Mayor and Council. Okay.
There you go.
So what we'd like to do is, the next public meeting that this would be discussed at is planned for Tuesday, August 22nd. It is not a regularly scheduled council meeting, but it is, will be a special council meeting. So that's the next time we'd like to talk about this, at which time staff will be presenting the actual proposed or draft list of projects and the schedule for completing them. So this would be the very meaningful discussion of the projects.
But key word is staff presents draft. At that point, we all start wrestling.
So on the 8th, are you going to do the rest of these, or the rest of the other 15 of these are set? They don't need discussion?
They are set as described there.
Okay, so there's not going to be one
Right.
of these meetings after the 8th?
Unless requested by the council, staff had not planned one.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. And then the 22nd, you're going to take all this that you've been coalescing in an amazing way and give it back.
Yeah, that's the one that I think people are expecting. That's when a proposed list and a schedule comes out.
Right.
It gets put in front of this council and they start to work through it and
Yeah.
come up with a plan that for sure reflects this council's priorities.
So that's, thank you, appreciate it.
Other questions? We'll just kind of walk around the room. You go ahead and start on the end. We'll
Okay.
just go ahead.
My reaction, and I give an opinion because things tend to get away from the public and get done before anybody knows it. I mean, that's just the fact of life, it's not a criticism. But the conclusion I'm drawing from the descriptions here is that the council is not interested in enhancing or supporting businesses that are not dining establishments, and that taking away parking spaces for dining establishments is to the detriment of other businesses that are retail or professional offices and that sort of thing. And you are picking winners and losers, and the losers are the folks who need parking spaces that are taken away. And the other conversations are not enhancing or taking into account an aging population and accessibility for people who don't want to ride a bike and don't walk very well or can't walk very well. So I find it very troubling that this whole conversation is to eliminate parking and and off-street parking, because if there's not enough parking, A, people won't come here, and B, they'll park on the street. And that's just the way it's going to be, because that's the way people are. And so I would highly recommend that you dial back the elimination of parking to the detriment of other businesses who also need to thrive here, and make sure that there's enough accessibility for those who have a need for it. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I apologize, but I'm still not clear. Is there a meeting like this on August 8th? No.
There's a
Just a regular
council meeting on August 8th.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. I'm pleased to see, consider developing an inclusive housing program. I think everybody knows because I've been talking about that. Very pleased to see that on the list. When I look, though, at the Fairview Focus Area Implementation Plan, when the council talked about affordable housing, it was mentioned when we were talking about the project, the RFP for this, thank you, Lot 2. Some of the council members expressed that Fairview Focus Area would be a better place for affordable housing. So I would like to see that as part of that. That would be my request, that that would be part of Fairview, in addition to, obviously, the longer-term inclusive planning that might require, as you said, a few years and might require a consultant. Something that apparently didn't get to council members, consider amending the sign ordinance. I am and will continue to be a broken record on that. I feel passionately about the role of the arts in our community and the role that murals could play. There are just countless examples in DuPage County of other communities that have drawn people in so many ways besides just giving an outlet for people who want to express themselves in the arts. So I'm hoping that perhaps 2 council members will still speak up about that.
It's on the list.
It's on the list.
Yeah.
It just didn't need definition.
We all agreed.
We all understand it.
Oh, I misunderstood what you said.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that anything not mentioned tonight didn't.
No,
That's the 22nd.
Yeah, let's add some
Oh,
clarity.
okay.
What was
Yeah.
what was on the list tonight that was discussed were just the items where, over the last week and a half or so, council members expressed some uncertainty about the definition of the issue. All of these issues, 29 of them, remain on the list today.
Okay.
And the discussion on the 22nd will be in earnest and may extend past then, as we try and figure out, do we do all 29? Whatever do we put them in? Do we do 3? Whatever that's where that conversation happens.
Thank you, and I apologize for misunderstanding what you said, but I appreciate the clarification, and that's good news. I also see on page 8, Creative Public Art Space Leasing Program. That's a really interesting idea. I will be interested in hearing more about that. I'm excited to see that on the list, so thank you.
Go ahead.
This was my first meeting, so kudos to all of you guys. This was great. I've just got 2 questions. First is, I'm considering the development of an inclusive housing program with affordable housing. I would like to suggest that included in that term, affordable housing, be housing for persons with disabilities, because their income is quite limited. And if I have a child who has a disability, if the housing isn't affordable, that child would have to move out of this community. Secondly, in my professional life, I have spent most of it with community organization and NPOs. And on your community grants program, which is what I've worked with most of my professional life, you end up with it being a competitive process. And I'm wondering if that term could be looked at by the council so that it be a process where there is a dialogue. For instance, what I am used to is that the council would say, we need to have this thing done in Downers Grove, and our budget says we can allocate so much money to it, and therefore you ask the NPOs to put an RFP for that. And the NPOs could also work together. So for example, Robin and I, let's say, come up with $10,000, could come up with a proposal where Robin asks for 5, I ask for 5, and we meet your needs. On the flip side of that, though, in terms of the dialogue, with the NPOs being very much involved with the community, perhaps there's a need in the community that the NPOs can identify, which could then be brought to the council. But that it's not competitive, it's a working together to resolve issues.
Based on what the council directed staff to do tonight, that change will be made. It will be removed. That phrase, competitive process, is being removed.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, everyone in this room for being here so late tonight. This is great, and I know we're all taking a ton of time out of our days, so I really appreciate it. I love how much we've been talking about, there needing to be research and intentionality, and I think there have been a lot of good comments in the audience on making sure that we know the impacts and that we're thinking about the fairness to everyone, and so, not taking things away if they would harm folks, and just really wanting to ensure that with everything we're doing, we have the full picture, and I think that just really speaks to how critical it will be to get plans in order, right? And so to have a sustainability plan. So we know we're doing the right things, and so we know where we are to Bruce's point on the data and the metrics, and we know that what we're doing is good and that it matters. So we're already doing so much, but I think having that clarity will be really awesome. Having the council, which I totally agree has to be renamed, Environmental Concerns Commission sounds so lame. It should not be lame, it should be awesome. It should be a group of people who can help ensure that all the things are connected in the right ways. And having a staffer, right? Like Naperville has 2 sustainability staffers, and they're considering getting a 3rd. They're thinking they might need a grant writer just to start applying for all the funds that are available out there and managing them. Like, what? We should have at least one. I do think, right, yeah, we're already doing so many great things. It is about doing more, but it's also about leveraging best practices. It's about getting connected, making sure that what we're doing maps up to what else is happening and all the grant funding that's available. And I will send a note on a particular grant that I just learned Naperville is applying to ensure they receive, because there are funds earmarked for Downers Grove, it looks like. I'll send an email. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we're taking advantage of all those opportunities.
I just wanted to add a little bit. There was a good discussion about the tree preservation ordinance potential item earlier, and I just want to mention that most but not all of the council were here in April of 2022 when staff completed about a 10-page report looking at that very possible item and comparing the ordinances that are in place in several other DuPage County municipalities, and looking also at some North Shore communities, and the fact that there's a model ordinance that's put out by the Chicago Region Trees Initiative. So there's, to that point, A, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and B, a lot of the work to accomplish that has already been done in the sense that staff has already accumulated a lot of information there that's there to be reviewed. And yeah, I mean, and what they, what most of them describe in a nutshell is kind of what we talked about, that there would be a mandatory process, but not necessarily a mandatory outcome from it. That as a builder or developer is developing plans and putting in, their permit requests, that there would be some kind of process involving a tree survey, tree protection plan, review at some level with staff or a certified arborist, and some process in place to show that we care about trees and get people thinking about how to preserve and protect trees in this process, and with the possible addition of incentives for saving trees, adding additional trees, that you could, help keep the grove in Downers Grove. And it can be it can be as simple, and I've heard people describe examples of this as, connecting the water line at point B rather than point A, which means that you don't have to dig a trench across the root zone of a big tree in front. And it can also affect the trees in the parkways as well, so in addition to private trees. So there was another item that we didn't talk about reviewing the process of how we plan for and interact with our publicly owned trees, and which could very logically tie in with this. And I just want to mention, and bear with me for a minute. So, I mean, some of the report included communities such as Glen Ellen, Naperville, Westmont, Woodridge, Wheaton, Lyle, and Hinsdale, also Highland Park, Lake Forest, Glenview, and Lincolnshire up north. And just to say that, so builders that work in any of those communities are already going to be familiar with the process like that. It shouldn't be an undue burden. They should know how it works if we're to come up with something that's broadly similar. And for those builders who are not familiar with that, there could be a little learning curve, but a learning curve that would be a very good thing. I think it'd be a great item to put on the list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to hear so many exciting things to improve our community, our village. It's wonderful. I see a lot of these projects sort of under the umbrella of the environmental sustainability plan, in a sense, or at least through the lens of that. And one of my questions is that if that is voted for and somebody is hired or whatever, if that gets approved, how do you prioritize that section of it so that all these environmental projects then are seen through that lens or get filtered through that process? Question. I don't know if you can answer that.
Not yet.
Hypothetically.
My knowledge, like Mr.
Leslie.
Like I'm hearing that you want to amend this and this and this, and taking the broader ones of sustainability, like focus on the bottom line here of sustainability. We don't want this any old tree. We want the good tree which will last a long time for future generations. We don't want the crappy old garbage can which will break apart in 5 days or something. So thinking of the long term and like legit projects, not your eBay or Craigslist.
Okay. Thank you all for sticking with it tonight. We'll be back at it again in a couple of weeks. See you then as well. Any parting shots from the council?
Just thank you all again for coming.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.